हेलो। हाँ ठीक है, चलो। गुड इवनिंग एवरीवन। वो मूवी देखिए, गो गोवा गॉन। मुझे बहुत अच्छी लगती हैं यार ये सब मूवीज जिनमें बहुत एंटरटेनमेंट टाइम पास वाला होता है ना। माई फेवरेट मूवी वेलकम, ऑल टाइम फेवरेट मूवी टाइम पास। वो सीन याद आ रहा था, जंगल में दम शराट्स तो नहीं खेलूंगा ना, तो 2 वर्ड्स, तो आई वॉज थिंकिंग टीचिंग यू विदाउट स्पीकिंग। एनीवेज चलो, let's begin our class everyone. I hope everybody is doing good. Your preparation must not be stressful. This preparation journey, this you're going to spend about 1.5 2 years at least in this journey, है ना? About 1 year is the preparation time and 1 year is the duration of exam. So 2 years minimum, if you get in the first attempt, 2 years minimum is required. You cannot be stressful in this journey. So never be stressful. How will you not be stressful? I think I've talked about this in your batch earlier also. How to not be stressful in your preparation. You will not be stressful only when you have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you will always be stressful. I don't remember कि मैंने शायद आपके बैच में एग्जाम्पल दिया है पहले, ये वाला नहीं दिया है, but benefit of doubt I'll give it again. Imagine 2 students. One student has prepared a plan, sticks to that plan, has a strategy, sticks to that strategy, that I should be here, my position, my preparation should be at this particular level in 1 year's time. And in order to achieve that 1 year target, I will have to be at 9 months time, I should be here, at 6 months time, I should be here, at 3 months time, I should be here, starting from zero. In order to achieve what you will be there, where will you be at 3 months time, you should know at the end of 1 month, at the end of second month, this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, 3. At the end of 1 month, where should you be? At the end of second month, where should you be? At the end of third month, where would you be? To know where would you be at the end of 1 month, you need to know where would you be at the end of 1 week. Always divide your preparation with weekly targets. You should always have weekly targets for your preparation. If you work really hard, बहुत मेहनत करी, 2 अखबार पढ़ रहे हैं, जिस टीचर ने बोला वो पढ़ रहे हैं. If you work really hard, put in lot of efforts, you are studying for 16-17 hours a day, but you don't have a plan. If you don't have a plan, then you will always be anxious. You versus some other person who has a plan, who does exactly what you are doing. दोनों लोग exactly same चीज पढ़ रहे हैं, exactly same मेहनत कर रहे हैं. One person has a plan, one person doesn't have a plan. The person who has a plan will not be anxious. The person who doesn't have a plan will be anxious. Anxiety is the biggest killer of our hope, our efforts, our happiness, certainly our motivation. Anxiety kills our motivation. If we are anxious, questions like why am I preparing for this exam? Why do I want to become a civil servant? All these questions will continue to haunt you during your preparation time. अगर आप इन सब क्वेश्चन से हॉन्ट होते रहोगे, you will never be able to concentrate on your studies. Why? Because you are anxious. And why are you anxious? You are anxious because you don't have a plan. You don't know where you are going. You are working very hard. It's like going to a gym and not knowing what to do. पसीना आप जिम में बहुत बहा रहे हो, लेकिन आपको पता नहीं है. It's like swimming in an ocean. You don't know where the island is. Somebody else has planned, okay, this is where I want to be, whereas you don't have a plan. You are also swimming. आप भी पूरी जान लगा के तैर रहे हो बचने के लिए, लेकिन उसको पता है कहाँ जाना है, आपको नहीं पता कहाँ जाना है. You must always know where your target lies. This is how you should prepare. Make your preparation like this. Divide your time like this. This I remember, मैंने आपको एक चीज पहले भी क्लास में बताई थी, that how to know whether you are ready to give exam or not. It's almost 1 month since 1 month to prelim. अब तो 25 दिन से भी कम रह गए हैं to prelims. Can you write optional paper tomorrow morning? If presented with last year's optional paper, can you write optional paper tomorrow morning? If the answer to that question is yes, go ahead and give this year's prelims. If the answer to that question is no, do not even think of giving prelims. Why? Anxiety. Anxiety is the biggest killer of hope, of your motivation, of your efforts. Don't be anxious. The person who has prepared this strategy, the person who has prepared this plan, that person at the end of 1 week, at the end of 1 month, at the end of 3 months, that person would know that my preparation is on track. Therefore, that person would be happy, would enjoy, would try to do some things which make that person happy. Badminton khelna, football khelna, running करने जाना, movie देखना, that person will be happy. Why? Because that person has planned. आप मूवी देखने जाओगे तो आपके दिमाग में 100 सवाल रहेंगे कि मूवी देखने में क्यों चला गया, मेरा टाइम वेस्ट हो गया. सो प्लीज प्रिपेयर अ स्ट्रैटेजी, प्लीज प्रिपेयर अ प्लान. ठीक है, चलो लेट्स बिगिन अ क्लास एवरीबॉडी. लास्ट टाइम वी स्टार्टेड विद अ डिस्कशन ऑन लिमिटेशंस ऑफ मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी. We started with a discussion on limitations of monetary policy. And in that limitations of monetary policy, the first thing that we discussed was monetary policy transmission. Monetary policy transmission. In fact, this is the biggest part of limitation of monetary policy. Monetary policy transmission, MPT. We discussed the concept of repo rate translating into changes in repo rate translating into changes in interest rates in market. Essentially the bank's lending rate. This is what our monetary policy transmission was. How effective is a change in repo rate? RBI drives the change in repo rate. How effectively this change in repo rate is translated into the change in change in interest rates in the market. This is what we discussed last time, monetary policy transmission. आज हम क्या डिस्कस करने वाले हैं? We are going to carry on with this monetary policy. इसके अंदर we looked at the concept of prime lending rate, base rate, and finally MCLR, and now MCLR with benchmarking system, external benchmark. ये हमने देखा था. Prime lending rate, base rate, MCLR with external benchmarking. We saw this. What was MCLR? The latest one. MCLR is that banks are required to explicitly declare their interest rates as well as the formula to arrive at those interest rates. Base rate में केवल interest rate declare करना था. Prime lending rate में कुछ declare नहीं करना है. In base rate you have to declare interest rate. In MCLR, you have to declare interest rate as well as the formula. How did a particular bank arrive at its base rate? And that formula has a basic requirement. That formula must be, interest rate must be a function of variable cost of bank. The marginal cost of funds based lending rate. The lending rate of the banks must be based on marginal cost of funds. How would it be based on marginal cost of funds? Every bank is free to decide. My interest rate would be marginal cost plus 4%. Your interest rate would be marginal cost plus 5%. Somebody else's interest rate would be marginal cost raised to the power 1/2 plus 3%. Whatever. Every bank is free to decide their formula. But the requirement is formula must explicitly have your marginal cost. That is your variable cost. Under the external benchmarking system, RBI has laid down certain external benchmarks in order for the banks to anchor their interest rates to these benchmarks. So variable cost के अंदर there can be repo rate, there can be MIBOR, Mumbai Interbank Offered Rate, there can be interbank call rate, which is one of the examples. MIBOR is one of the examples of interbank offered rate. There can be yields on government security. So there are multiple external benchmarks that RBI has laid down, and RBI said that banks can use these interest rates to be part of their MCLR formula. So this was MCLR. तो ये चीज हमने डिस्कस करी थी यहाँ पे लास्ट टाइम. मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी ट्रांसमिशन, चेंजेस इन रेपो रेट ट्रांसलेटिंग इनटू चेंजेस इन इंटरेस्ट रेट्स इन द मार्केट. Now, as we discussed, these were quote unquote normal times. normal times. Today we are going to discuss a very important stuff, a little bit advanced stuff. We are going to discuss something which is called as quantitative easing. Quantitative easing, QE. Quantitative easing. We are going to discuss the concept of liquidity trap. Liquidity. We have discussed what liquidity trap is. We are going to revisit liquidity trap today. And when we visit liquidity trap today, when we see quantitative easing, almost our entire chapter of monetary policy is going to get revised today. Fairly advanced concepts, fairly advanced monetary policy. And in order to understand these, we'll have to go back to our basics of monetary policy. We'll have to see what bonds are, what returns on bonds are, as in yields are. We have to see how do those yields change. Understanding of QE. Before I begin QE, why is understanding of QE important for us? In prelims examination, at max, the question that UPSC will ask would be this, that which of the following correctly describes quantitative easing? And that would be a very easy question. Answer to that you will get in just about 5 minutes. Which of the following describes quantitative easing? Another question may be, if अगर QE से question पूछा जाता है, liquidity trap से question पूछा जाता है, question would be really easy in prelims. Question would be maybe quantitative easing. It might be such an easy question that quantitative easing deals with which of the following parts, which of the following. उसमें one option would be environment, one option would be geography, one option would be monetary policy. इतने आसान option होंगे उसके अंदर. So question as far as quantitative easing is concerned, I have absolutely no doubt that the question would be very easy. बहुत आसान question होगा. In mains, I don't think, I'm not so sure, but in mains, I don't think that they will ask question regarding quantitative easing. I don't think so. I don't think that they will ever ask a question on QE. What they may ask is that, what is the effect of interest rate decisions of Federal Reserves on Indian economy, of Federal Reserve on Indian economy? Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of America, America ka RBI, Federal Reserve. What is the effect of interest rate decisions of Federal Reserve on Indian economy? This is a question that they may ask. It would be a very good question, a little bit difficult side, but this question is something that may be asked in mains. इस type का main में सवाल, I can expect that this might be there. Specific question explicitly asking you to explain quantitative easing in mains examination, I don't think so ever. Quantitative easing explain करने के लिए पूछा जाए आपके एग्जाम में, I don't think so that this may be asked. It may be asked. They have asked questions like this, questions of similar difficulty level in economics, in other subjects. They have asked question of similar difficulty level, but chances of such questions being asked are less. So why is it that I'm going to teach you quantitative easing today? As I already gave you a disclaimer, a fairly complex topic, a little bit not difficult, certainly won't be difficult. We'll be able to join the dots, and once we are able to join the dots, the puzzle gets solved. We'll have a realization that it's not difficult. So why am I going to teach you QE today? Because QE is something that you read daily in newspapers. Effects of quantitative easing is something that we come across daily in newspaper. We might not come across the word QE. QE word हम शायद नहीं देखें newspaper में on a daily basis, but more often this word would also be there. But more often than this word, the effects of quantitative easing would be there without actually mentioning the word quantitative easing. QE की understanding, to understand QE would mean that we have a very good overview of monetary policy, that we are able to visualize monetary policy in action. This is something where monetary policy is seen in action. अभी तक जो हमने देखा है, that is quite theoretical. We have seen monetary policy in action, that what would happen if growth rate is high, inflation is high. We have seen all those things. But yes, QE helps us internalize that stuff that we have read. That is why I think QE is important for us to understand. Okay. So before we begin, let me answer your questions. विकास का क्वेश्चन है, in earlier years falling RDR would result in some kind of chaos, but nowadays the digital currency is gaining popularity. The money deposited in the bank is merely a digital number. Even if the bank lends 100% of its deposit now, this hasn't disrupted everyday transaction as the depositor does not use real currency. But in real, the bank will not have any money as 100% of deposit is being lent. So does that mean the digital exchange of currency doesn't carry any intrinsic value? Does that mean digital exchange? विकास, थोड़ा सा क्वेश्चन आपका अजीब सा नहीं है? Maybe I think you have, I don't know whether you have yourself framed the question or you have come across this passage and there is something you want to understand in this passage from somewhere. But what does it mean? मतलब आपका क्वेश्चन क्या कहना क्या चाहते हो कि डिजिटल एक्सचेंज ऑफ करेंसी डजंट कैरी एनी इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू? इसका मतलब क्या है? डिजिटल एक्सचेंज ऑफ करेंसी डजंट कैरी एनी इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू. Currency, the currency, no 500 rupees note that you have in your pocket, it has no intrinsic value. It has a fiat value, number one. Similarly, the digital exchange of currency, I have got some numbers in my bank account. मेरे account में मान लो 2 लाख रुपए हैं. So that is a number which is written there. I transfer that money in somebody else's bank account. A number gets reflected in that person's bank account. I have transferred 100 rupees in somebody to somebody. So it's merely a digital number written there. भाई 100 लिखा है वहां पे केवल. So what is meant by this term that digital transaction doesn't have any intrinsic value? Intrinsic value किस चीज की होती है? Intrinsic value तो उन goods की है जो आप purchase कर रहे हो. You are purchasing goods worth 100 rupees from somebody and you are transferring 100 rupees to that person's bank account. As simple as that. Digital currency intrinsic थोड़ा सा अजीब सा लग रहा है. मनु का क्वेश्चन पढ़ते हैं. Sir, can you please tell difference between base and momentum effect in inflation? And while last year in first 2 quarters we had momentum effect and not base effect. Economic survey says something of this type if I am able to understand that line correctly. बिल्कुल बताएंगे यार, क्यों चिंता कर रहे हो? बिल्कुल बताते हैं. Base effect and momentum effect. Let me tell you क्या होता है. Base effect and momentum effect. सब लोग ध्यान से सुनो. Base effect के ऊपर many times question, at least in UPSC also they have asked a question on base effect, but एक ही बार पूछा है बेस इफेक्ट के ऊपर. लेकिन हाँ, स्टूडेंट्स कई बार पूछते हैं इस चीज को कि बेस इफेक्ट क्या है, मोमेंटम इफेक्ट क्या है. सो लेट मी टेल यू व्हाट दिस इज. बेस इफेक्ट एंड मोमेंटम इफेक्ट कुछ नहीं है, भावना, वर्ड्स, नॉट भावना है, वर्ड समझो, इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज का वर्ड. बेस एंड मोमेंटम, बेस इफेक्ट, मोमेंटम एंड मोमेंटम. What is momentum? Momentum is that something is in motion. Something is in motion. If prices are rising, if prices are on a rising trend, सुनो ध्यान से, last year prices, Manu is saying while last year in first 2 quarters we had momentum effect and not base effect. Last year in first 2 quarters we had momentum effect and not base effect. Base effect क्या होता है पहले समझ लेते हैं. Base effect is that simply when you grow from a low base, जब आपका base ही कम है, your base is 100 and on this 100, let's say the base year price was 100 rupees and on 100 price has increased by 10 rupees. Therefore, what is the percentage increase? Percentage terms में this is increased by 10%. If your base is 150 and on this same price increase of 10 rupees, अगर आपका base 150 है and on this there is a price increase of 10 rupees, so now in percentage terms how much this is? 10 upon 150. So this is somewhere around 1/15 कितना हुआ? लगभग 6%, ऑलमोस्ट 6%. So 10 rupees increase over 100 is 10%. 10 rupees increase over 150 is 6%. If your base is low, अगर आपका base कम है, if last year prices were low, if prices of last year were low, then a same amount of price this year will translate it to a higher rate of inflation. But if your base year, last year's prices were high, then same amount of increase will still look like a lower level of inflation. अगर 150 पे 10 रुपए बढ़ रहे हैं, so it looks like inflation has increased, prices have increased by only 6%. But if 100 के ऊपर 10 rupees बढ़ रहे हैं, prices have increased by 10%. So based on what last year prices were, last year price 150 थे या फिर 100 रुपए थे, same price increase will translate into different levels of inflation. So base effect हम use करते हैं economics में term, we use the term base effect when we have to designate something that is growing from a low base. If prices last year were growing from a low base, then we will witness high degree of inflation. तो हम बोलेंगे most of the inflation is attributable to base effect. Why? Because last year prices were very less. Is this clear? Because last year prices were very less, therefore we are witnessing a high rate of inflation. Usually, let's say, prices should have been 105. Prices 105 होने चाहिए थे usually. But last year price was 100. This year the price has increased to 110. 5 rupees increase. अगर usual scenario होता, if it was a usual scenario, then price increase is 5 upon 105. But because you are growing from a low base, the scenario is 10 upon 100, that is 10%. यहां पे इस केस में about 4.6%. ये समझ में आया? तो प्राइस इस साल सेम है 110, लेकिन because growing from low base, rate of inflation is different. So this is called as base effect in economics. Inflation is high because of low base, or inflation is low because of a high base. Base effect. How much of the inflation can be attributed to previous year's prices? Inflation हम कैसे measure करते हैं? Year over year. Inflation is measured this year's price minus last year's price, difference upon last year's price, year over year. So how much of inflation can be attributed to last year's prices? Number one, this is base effect. Second is momentum effect. Momentum effect क्या है? Momentum effect is, let's say, last year's prices in the month of January, February, March, 3 महीने के प्राइस देख लेते हैं. In the year 2020, in the year 2020, January का प्राइस was 100, February का प्राइस was 105, March का प्राइस was 110. Now this year in 2021, in 21, 100 से price has increased to 110, let's say. So there is a 10% rate of inflation here. In February, price has increased to 125. So there is a 20 upon 105, इतने परसेंट की inflation है यहाँ पे. In March, price has increased to 135. Now if you realize closely, inflation calculate कैसे कर रहे हैं? Calculation of inflation is done in month of March, in month of February, in month of January. How is inflation calculated? Calculate तो हो रही है this 25 rupees of difference upon 110. इतना परसेंटेज जो भी आता है, this is the percentage rate of inflation in March. This 20 upon 105 percentage is the rate of inflation in month of February. 10 upon 100 is the rate of inflation in month of January. But if you look at it closely, you will realize कि prices are also increasing like this. March में जो high price है, price which is high in March, this 135 rupees, is also high because prices in February were also very high. Momentum. So price has started to rise, let's say in the month of January, and because of that price is high in March. तो अब यहां पे मार्च का इन्फ्लेशन एक तो हुआ बेस की वजह से, which is how we calculate inflation. 25 upon 110, that is the rate of inflation. But when we try to discern, when we try to separate that what is causing this high rate of inflation in month of March, we say that it is not a low base. यहां पे बेस कम है, इस वजह से इन्फ्लेशन हाई नहीं है. Inflation in March is not high because there is low base. March base is normal, low nahi hai. Inflation is March is high because the prices have gained momentum in previous months. In January, February, March, the prices have gained momentum. This is called momentum effect. Clear? Momentum effect क्या है? Base effect क्या है? I hope this should be clear enough for everybody. लक्ष्य का क्वेश्चन है, सर इन द केस ऑफ लो ग्रोथ हाई इन्फ्लेशन why wouldn't the monetary policy stance be to target high inflation trading off growth, because as per inflation targeting monetary policy's primary objective is to keep inflation in range. Why go in complication of monetary policy limitation? Is base rate set by RBI, that is the floor rate. First question जो आपका है लक्ष्य, this question will be answered today. What happens in a stagflation situation, we'll answer that today. अभी हम जैसे बात करें ना abnormal monetary policy, we'll talk about that. You are putting it quite simply, but it's not that simple, as we'll see in some time. Second part जो आपका है base rate set by RBI, no. We have, please remember this question might be there in the exam as one liner, 1 mark question हो सकता है prelims में. Interest rates of the banking system are completely deregulated by RBI. RBI does not set interest rates. RBI does not tell banks how much interest rate should they give to their depositors and how much interest rate should they charge from their lenders. There is completely no control. RBI does not control, as in does not set. RBI does not tell banks, does not direct banks to set interest rate. Banks are free to do. Banks are free to set the interest rates in a manner that they want. ठीक है, कोई interest rate set नहीं करता है RBI. Banks are free to set interest rates whatever they deem are right. Base rate, as we discussed, it's a declared rate. Every bank will declare what is the minimum interest that the bank is charging from its customers. Minimum interest. That is from the best of best customer, what interest will the bank charge. That is what base rate is. RBI will not tell every bank is free. अगर आप बैंक जाओगे कभी या कभी गए होगे तो आपने देखा होगा, you might have seen that in bank there is a electronic board somewhere hung in the bank, and on that electronic board various interest rates are written. The first interest rate usually which is written there is base rate. They also write interest rate on savings bank account, interest rate on FD, RD of different maturities. Different interest rates are written on that electronic board and it keeps on getting updated from time to time. That is part of RBI's directions to bank to transparently declare interest rate. बैंक को वहां पे एक बोर्ड टांग के रखना पड़ता है जिसपे लिखना होता है, इट हैज टू डिस्प्ले व्हाट आर द इंटरेस्ट दैट इट इज चार्जिंग. इट इज पार्ट ऑफ आरबीआई's efforts to direct the banking system to be more transparent in their interest rates. RBI does not tell what interest rate, but RBI can certainly tell that you display, you tell the customers what your interest rate is. Okay, this is what RBI does. Prabha का question है, last question Prabha का. I'm facing difficulty in understanding monetary policy handouts. I tried 2 times but not able to find clarity. Please suggest some suggestions regarding this. So Prabha, what you can do is, जो handouts आपको दिए गए हैं, जैसे there is an article of Bloomberg, there is an article of RBI, there is a website link of RBI, and there is one Word document which is again taken up from RBI. If you are finding them difficult, don't worry. They are just for an additional understanding. वो extra over and above what is required के लिए हैं. If you are finding them difficult, do not worry. Please stick to the printed material. Read the printed material twice if you have to. And once you read that and understand that, उसके बाद आप वो material पढ़ना. 2 handouts आपको मिले हैं. After that, read that. ठीक है? Read the printed material first. If you want to read it once, twice, read it, and then go to those handouts. They are fairly, भाई जैसे मैंने बोला था last class में भी किसी ने पूछा था, many terms used there are financial terms, accountancy terms, which are not relevant for us. जैसे वो Bloomberg वाला आर्टिकल है, उसमें RBI की बैलेंस शीट दे रखी है, so very complex terms are used there. I don't want you to see those complex terms or get entangled in those complex terms. I want you to read that article and understand whatever little you can. If you can understand more, if you are accountant, तो आप ज़्यादा समझ जाओगे. But broad understanding that there is an idea that RBI earns income, and there is an idea that RBI transfers this income, and there is a debate that what should RBI do with that income. That is what is there in that article. है ना? तो आप अपने आप को please don't entangle yourself in those complexities. देखो, it is my duty to give you certain good articles to study. मैं ऐसा नहीं कर सकता हूं कि मैं आपको बोलूं कि वो आर्टिकल मत पढ़ो क्योंकि वो कॉम्प्लेक्स है. Such articles would be there in the Hindu and Indian Express also with similar complexity. I cannot say that please stop reading the article. But what I can tell you is that don't confuse yourself with all those terms which are written there. वो terms वहां पे लिखी हैं, अच्छी बात है, किसी ने लिखी हैं, but आपको अगर terms समझ में नहीं आती हैं तो आप उस आर्टिकल को ब्रॉडली पढ़ो, बस उससे ऐसे कहते हैं भावनाओं को समझो, जस्ट उसकी भावनाओं को समझो एंड देन लीव इट असाइड. दैट इज व्हाट यू कैन डू. ठीक है, चलो. सो लेट्स बिगिन एवरीबॉडी विद द क्लास फॉर द डे. So as I said, today we'll be discussing monetary policy in those abnormal times. We'll be discussing something called as liquidity trap, and quantitative easing, QE. Now let me build a little bit background for quantitative easing. And the background is in form of why QE. Why? Now you'll try to probably understand or appreciate that why am I teaching this thing. QE was a policy response undertaken in wake of financial crisis of 2007. Financial crisis, which started in 2007-2008. The Great Recession, as it's sometimes called, or the financial crisis of 2007-8. QE was the response. It was the response of American Central Bank, Japanese Central Bank, European Central Bank, England, Bank of England, the British Central Bank. It was the response of all these central banks in order to counter the effects of financial crisis of 2007. This is what QE, this is why QE is important, this is why QE is relevant. In order to understand QE, first a brief overview of what happens in 2007. क्या होता है 2007 में? Somebody has said also, we had a brief discussion over this. If you want to understand in a good manner, you can watch that movie, The Big Short. It's available on Netflix. अच्छी मूवी है, उसको देखो. अच्छी मजेदार हंसी मजाक की मूवी है, बड़ी. It's a really good movie and they try to explain complex things in a really easy, intuitive, easy to understand manner. So you can watch that movie. ठीक है, time waste नहीं होगा. It's a really good movie. So you can watch that, The Big Short. Anyway, so what happens in 2007 financial crisis? क्या होता है 2007 financial crisis में? Think about it. What do banks do? What do banks do? Banks take deposits and banks lend money. This discussion that we are having is relevant in Indian context as well, in the context of failure of Yes Bank, in the context of आप लोग थोड़े नए हो इस मामले में, you might not be the ones who are reading current affairs of 2018, but there was one more crisis of NBFCs in India in 2017 and 18. So ask those students जो उस समय थे, तो they also wanted to learn about what happened in 2007. Why? Because there was an NBFC called IL and FS. IL and FS, Infrastructure Leasing and Financial Service. There was an NBFC called DHFL, Diwan Housing Financial Services Limited. So all these NBFCs, they failed. Then comes failure of Yes Bank. Then comes failure of at the time of Yes Bank, there was failure of PMC, Punjab Maharashtra Cooperative Bank. So all these failures in the banking system, in the finance world, we have to understand that. We must know about them. These are some things that we read on a daily basis in newspapers. From last 1.5 years, since the time you have started to prepare, you have been reading only about COVID and what should be done in COVID. Okay? But world beyond that also exists. So failure of IL and FS, DHFL, Yes Bank, Punjab Maharashtra Cooperative Bank. In 2007, all of you might have heard about Lehman Brothers, one of the oldest investment banks in the world. Failure of Lehman Brothers and so many other banks, financial institutions collapsed in 2007 financial crisis. So what basically happened? The reasoning here and here is broadly the same. Reasoning क्या है? Reasoning is, what do? Banks take deposits and banks lend money. That's it. What do banks do? Now, in order to enforce the trust in banking system, there is a regulator. RBI हमारा है, Federal Reserve US में है. So there is a regulator of the banking system, which basically tells the banks that you have to maintain certain deposit ratios. You have to invest some amount of money in certain designated assets. You'll always have to have some amount of money which is your own money. अपना पैसा आपके पास होना चाहिए. As any depositor पैसा, you must also have your own money at all times, so that in case there is some kind of default, then you should be able to pay back from your own money. So regulators are there in order to enforce trust in the banking system. The banks essentially, they derive their business or they derive their profits from lending. Banks lend money and from this they earn an interest rate which is their profit. The interest which the banks have is to lend as much money as they can. Banks would like to lend as much money as they can. Why? Because lending earns them profits. Now, when banks lend money, many times what happens is the loans which the banks give are not very safe loan, are not of very good quality, or the borrower is not a very good quality borrower. जैसे something called as a teaser loan. Again, was in current affairs, maybe some of you have heard about it. Teaser loan. What is a teaser loan? Teaser loan क्या होता है? मूवी आती है, मूवी से पहले उसका ट्रेलर आता है, ट्रेलर से पहले अब उसका टीजर भी आता है, उससे पहले अब एक टीजर ट्रेलर भी आता है, ट्रेलर का टीजर, ठीक है? टीजर, इट्स टीजिंग यू, इट्स अट्रैक्टिंग यू to watch that particular movie. Not just movie, it's first attracting you to watch that trailer. Then the trailer will attract you to watch that particular movie. Teaser loan. Teaser क्या है? As far as loan is concerned, teaser loan is that loan which banks tease their lenders with. Banks will tease their lenders with low cost loan. आप आओ तो सही हमारे पास. You please come to us. Do not worry, we will lend money to you. हमारे पास बहुत पैसा, we have a lot of money. We will lend as much money as you want and at as low interest as you want. Why? Because banks' interest lies in lending money. Banks would want to lend as much money as possible. Why? Because they want to earn interest on that. So banks try to attract customers by teasing them with certain, let me say, immoral attractivities. Banks will say that you don't have to pay any interest for first 2 years. पहले 2 साल के लिए कोई interest pay नहीं करना है. After that you will be paying a high rate of interest. But ये जो condition है, after that, after 2 years a high rate of interest, this condition is hidden somewhere. When you go to the bank to take a loan, bank will tell you first 2 years कोई interest pay नहीं करना है, and after that interest rate will be as determined by the market. Market determined interest rate will be based on your risk profile. You are a very risky individual who doesn't have a proper job. Your risk indicates that the interest rate that you are normally eligible for is, let's say, 12%. 12% पे आपको लोन मिलना चाहिए. बैंक will say for first 2 years interest माफ है, उसके बाद से अगले साल से 20% interest पे करना पड़ेगा. You are happy thinking कि पहले 2 साल में I will try to pay off as much principal as possible. But the fact is, you don't have a normal job. You are a risky customer who doesn't have a lot of money at hand. You will not be able to pay, you will not be able to reduce the principal in first 2 years. When 2 years are about to end, now you will start to panic that I have a huge loan and interest payment is coming up. Now you start to panic by, now you see कि भाई मैंने लोन ले रखा है, उसका मेरे को interest payment वापस करना है. But bank has given you a loan and now you are under an obligation to pay such loans. So example of teaser loans. Banks will attract many unworthy customers to lend money to. And now when these unworthy customers have been lent money, banks are under the impression that these people, by money lent kiya hai, it is a contract and therefore these people have to return the money. But banks maybe also forgot that there are chances that people might not actually be able to return the money. There is a chance that a person might not actually be able to return money. I have taken loan from the bank to buy a house. Banks attracted me by saying that you will be paying a very low rate of interest and we will give you a huge amount of loan. You can return it in, let's say, next 20 years. So I was attracted to the bank and I purchased a house because of that loan which the bank was giving. Now, when the time of repayment comes, I don't have enough money. Banks thought that people will always be able to return the money, but what happened was job market was not so secure and people started to default on their loans. People started to default on the loan. जो लोन लिए थे उस पे लोगों ने डिफॉल्ट करना स्टार्ट कर दिया. Now, अब बैंक्स बेवकूफ तो नहीं है कि बैंक्स लोगों को पैसा दे देंगे विदाउट कंसिडरिंग कि भाई डिफॉल्ट की प्रोबेबिलिटी है. What would banks do? Banks would, whenever they give loans, they would also try to secure those loans. Secure through a collateral. Collateral क्या होता है? Collateral is security. I purchase a house. That house is purchased by me, but the ultimate ownership of that house lies with the bank. Why? Because bank has given most of the money. मैंने 5 करोड़ का घर खरीद लिया. 4.5 crores are paid by the bank. 50 lakhs have been paid by me. Ownership of the house lies with the bank. It's my duty to return that money to the bank in slow installments. Bank has lent me 4.5 crore rupees, but bank has kept my house as a collateral. So bank would start feeling that now my loan is safe. मैंने एक बेवकूफ आदमी को 4.5 करोड़ का लोन दे दिया. I have given so much amount of money to a, let's say, retarded person, and that person will be paying me an interest for next 20 years, a fair amount of interest for next 20 years. So my business is flourishing. My business is booming. What happens is sometimes the value of this collateral, the value of this security, value of this collateral may fall. Value of this collateral may fall. Think about it. Realize this thing. Quite easy to realize. Bank is attracting many people and giving them loans. Let's say bank is giving housing loans. इसको हम बोलते हैं ना 2007 फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस को सब प्राइम मॉर्टगेज क्राइसिस, हाउसिंग बबल. क्यों बोलते हैं हाउसिंग बबल? क्या है वो सब प्राइम मॉर्टगेज क्राइसिस? What is this? So banks, let's say, attract lots of people and give them housing loan. What does it cause? It causes an increase in demand of houses. A house, an asset bubble समझो क्या है? सब प्राइम lending crisis, housing collapse, housing market collapse. Understand this thing, asset bubble. Banks are attracting people and giving loans to them. Point number 1. Point number 2, this causes a huge demand of houses. When the demand of houses increase, the price of house increases. रियल एस्टेट प्राइसेस इंक्रीज ड्रास्टिकली. वाई? क्योंकि एकदम से डिमांड बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ गई है. एवरीबडी हैज मनी बिकॉज दैट मनी हैज बीन लेंट टू देम बाय द बैंक एंड एवरीबडी वांट्स टू बाय अ हाउस फॉर देमसेल्व्स एंड दैट लीड्स टू ट्रेमेंडस इंक्रीज इन प्राइस ऑफ हाउसेस. सो अ हाउस विच बैंक हैज लेंट मनी फॉर, उसकी वैल्यू एक साल पहले, let's say in 2006, value of that house was $1 million. And because bank is pushing up the price of housing market, the value of that house after 1 year has become $15 million. 1 million से 15 million हो गई एक साल के अंदर. Why? Because now there are so many people who are willing to purchase that house. Let's say now that house is sold for 15 million, 15 million का वो हाउस बिक जाता है, and the buyer has gotten this loan from the bank. 15 million में से 14 million have been given by the bank and 1 million have been contributed by the buyer. 1 million मैंने अपने लगाए हैं और $14 million have been given to me as a loan by the bank. Now I'm unable to pay my interest payments and principals back to the bank. 2006 में मैंने घर खरीद लिया, लेकिन उसके बाद जब इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट का टाइम आया, आई वॉज अनेबल टू पे माई ड्यूज टू द बैंक. आई डिफॉल्टेड ऑन माई पेमेंट्स. आई स्टार्टेड टू डिफॉल्ट ऑन माई पेमेंट्स. नाउ व्हेन आई स्टार्टेड टू डिफॉल्ट, आई सेड टू द बैंक, आई डोंट हैव एनीथिंग, टेक दिस हाउस. ये घर मेरे से ले लो, लेकिन मेरे पास पैसे नहीं है. आई किक, आप क्या मुझे किक आउट करने आओगे? आई विल माई सेल्फ किक माई सेल्फ आउट ऑफ दिस हाउस. आई एम अनेबल टू पे योर मनी बैक. Bank now comes and takes possession. What is bank's interest in that house? Bank has no interest. बैंक को तो वो हाउस, बैंक को घर खरीदने से क्या मतलब है? बैंक को तो पैसे पे इंटरेस्ट से मतलब है. Bank is concerned about the $14 million it lent and the interest that it was supposed to earn on those $14 million. Bank's interest is not in house, bank's interest is on those $14 million. Bank will now try to find a buyer for that house. Bank doesn't want that house, bank will now try to find another buyer for that house. But the point is, all buyers are defaulting, there is no buyer available in the market today. What happens? Demand collapses all of a sudden. Demand collapses, value of that house, which was $15 million, collapses back to $1 million, maybe even less than that. Why? Because now there is no buyer. On an asset whose real value was worth $1 million, bank gave a loan of $14 million. एक asset जिसकी real value $1 million थी. Bank gave the loan of $14 million on that particular asset. What does it translate to? Not just losses, losses would be a mild word. Collapse of the bank or not? अगर बैंक ने ऐसे बहुत सारे लोन दे रखे हैं, bank has given too many loans like this, what would it result for the bank? Complete loss, complete collapse of the bank's business. It has lent money and no money has come back. Forget about interest rate. No principal is coming back. No principal comes back. Bank, how will it meet the demand of its depositors? Those people who have deposited money in this bank, how will it be able to pay back? Certainly not. Bad lending practices by the bank led to collapse of the financial system. Such scenarios, as they say, such scenarios were till then not envisaged by the regulator. दुनिया में कहीं पे भी, anywhere in the world, not just America, anywhere in the world, such scenarios were not yet till then envisaged by the regulators. So regulators could not foresee the scenarios. Some people try to flag it off. Many people in fact try to flag it off that there is something which is going on. But such scenarios, such things kept going on, and ultimately that led to collapse of the entire financial system. Banks collapsed. Banks are the biggest entities in the financial system. Banks का पैसा केवल इन retail lenders के पास. It's not just these retail lenders who have borrowed money from the bank. Banks have given money to large investment banks. Banks have given money to large corporates. So all that money starts to now slow down in coming back to the banks. The banking system collapses, and with this collapses the entire financial system. America being the center of the world, with America collapses the financial system of Europe, Japan, even to some extent China, India not so much, but a little bit yes, India also gets affected. If America is affected, India will say rest of the world will be affected. Almost entire world gets drowned in this financial quagmire created by the American financial system. So this was, in brief, in very short, in very simple terms, as simple as I can make, very simple terms, this was the story of 2007 financial crisis. This is how the financial crisis happened. Now, when this financial crisis occurred, led to collapse of the banking system, entire financial system collapses. Depositors, they have lost their money in the banks. Depositors have lost their money. Therefore, everybody's savings, they have been wiped out. जिसका बैंक में पैसा था, savings have been wiped out. वो जिसने 14 million का लोन लिया था, that person is also he is homeless right now, that person. 1 million he had spent, अपने कहीं ना कहीं से जोड़ के 1 million दिया होगा, 14 million बैंक से लोन लिया. So he is also empty. That person is not enjoying. He is also empty. This person is also empty. So everybody, not everybody, many people have now become completely penniless. They don't have any money now because all of their savings have been lost. Why? Because of this teaser loans जिनको हम बोल सकते हैं, because of such kind of lending practices by the banking system. When they lose their savings, when they don't have any money with them, what will happen to their consumption? Consumption expenditure को क्या होगा? What will happen to their consumption expenditure? Naturally, nobody would be buying things now. You would certainly cut down as much consumption as you can. आपके पास you don't have money, you will start cutting down on your essentials as well. Maybe for example, now you don't need three mobile phones in the house. It's 2007. Everybody doesn't have a mobile phone in the house, but just think about it. Maybe now you start cutting down on your essentials as well. Why? Because the situation is very bleak now. Consumption collapses, and as a result, aggregate demand in the economy comes down. The economy formally enters a recession or a contraction. Contraction of economy क्यों है, समझ में आ रहा है? Contraction or this recession starts here. Recession of the economy starts here when banks lend, don't receive their money, collapse of banking system, unable to meet requirements of depositors, they lose their money. They cut down on their consumption. Everybody starts to cut down on their consumption, leads to fall in aggregate demand. Aggregate demand falls, you now enter into recession. Clear? How does recession start? How does contraction of the economy start in 2007 financial crisis? So now you have recession in the economy. Next, what happens? अब economy के अंदर situation है that there is recession. There is recession in the economy. Recession in the economy. Now we are looking at the fiscal policy or the government and the monetary policy or the Federal Reserve in order to correct the situation that has been created. The government through its fiscal policy and the Federal Reserve, Fed, through its monetary policy. Now we are looking at the two biggest authorities, that is the American government and the Federal Reserve, to correct this situation, to tide the country out of this situation. Federal Reserve says that okay, we will do whatever we can do. हम जो कर सकते हैं हम करेंगे. What can Federal Reserve do? Federal Reserve can increase. Federal Reserve, I'll use RBI here. RBI use कर लेता हूं जिससे more connect हो. Monetary Authority, RBI. What can RBI do? RBI says that we will increase money supply. We will increase money supply. This is the only thing that we can do on money supply. Only thing that which is there in our control is money supply. That is the best that can we do anything? Is there anything that else that we can do? We don't spend money. We don't lend money. हम कुछ नहीं करते, हम केवल money supply increase कर सकते. This is what we can do. What can government do? Government can increase spending. Government can increase expenditure. This is what the government can do. Now government increases expenditure. RBI or let's say Federal Reserve increases money supply, and then they expect that economy will come out of this recession. Economy will come out of this recession because the monetary authority is doing its job and the government is doing its job. Government is increasing expenditure, monetary policy is allowing more money to be spent by increasing money supply. Therefore, it is expected that the economy will recover. However, the recovery of economy does not take place. Small recovery, but that's it. Recovery of economy does not take place. क्या करें? We have seen when we wrote down yesterday that table, summary of monetary policy actions. What shall we do? But you have a recession going on in your country. What can the monetary policy authority do? Monetary policy can at best increase supply of money. What can the government do? We have seen it in our Keynesian policies that government can at best increase its expenditure. Government increases its expenditure in, let's say, providing government's expenditure is already very high. Government increases its expenditure in providing basic necessities. Government increases its expenditure in order to provide healthcare services free for all, education services free for all, some kind of social security, let's say pension services to people. So government's expenditure has increased many-fold because of that. Government is trying whatever it can do and the Federal Reserve is trying whatever it can do, but that is not leading to, does not result in any improvement, of economy. Rather, economy of US is suffering, and because European countries, which are closely integrated with America, their economies are now starting to feel the heat in after about, let's say, 1-2 years. Their economies are now getting even worse. So American economy ki recovery is not happening. It's not possible despite everybody doing whatever they can. Then they decide that now the time has come to increase the scale of what we are doing. Increase the scale of what we are doing manyfold. मनी सप्लाई इंक्रीज करते हैं, मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी से मनी सप्लाई इंक्रीज करी, एंड दे हैव फ्लडेड द मार्केट विद लॉट ऑफ मनी. गवर्नमेंट इज स्पेंडिंग अ लॉट ऑफ मनी, बट दैट इज नॉट लीडिंग टू डिजायरेबल कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस, डिजायरेबल इफेक्ट्स. Therefore, they decide that maybe more money is required. When I say the word more, it doesn't mean that earlier they were spending $10 billion or $100 billion and now they are spending $200 billion. Now they want to spend $300 billion. This is not what I mean by the word more. The word more here means earlier Federal Reserve's balance sheet, currency in circulation, amount of money, high powered money. Earlier, the Federal Reserve balance sheet was about $700 billion. लगभग $700 billion की Federal Reserve balance sheet थी. This was the amount of money circulating in American economy, as in the high powered money. About 750, 800 के आसपास मान लो, that was the amount of money circulating in the economy, in the American economy. From this, when I say that they said that we'll increase the scale of our scale of operations, they said that from this we will increase it to $4 trillion, 4 trillion. The size of American Federal Reserve's balance sheet पे क्या है? Assets and liabilities. The size of the balance sheet, how much currency is in circulation, how much money it has printed and circulated, size of money supply, the high powered money grew from $700 billion to $4 trillion. 700 से 800 900 नहीं हुआ, 700 से 4 trillion, $4,000 billion. This is what I mean by this word scale. Increase the scale. This happened sometime in the month of August 2011, July or August 2011 के आसपास this decision was taken. This decision in which the central bank decided to increase the scale of its operations, this decision got the name of QE. इस decision का नाम था QE, quantitative easing. Now first understand, why is government policy not working? Why is this monetary policy and government policy not working? Keynesian में हमने पढ़ा था, if you remember it, Keynesian में we studied Keynesian unemployment जब हमने देखा था. Remember the concept of unutilized capacity? याद है? याद नहीं होगा तो I'll just a quick revision of that. Keynes says that in an economy, Keynes ने बोला था economy में, let's say there is a firm which can produce 100 units. In the time of recession, this firm is producing, recession के time पे this firm is producing 80 units. Recession के time firm will produce 80 units. The firm will produce 80 units during the time of recession. The firm will not employ any new factor of production. Recession के time में firm is producing 80 units. Why? Because there is lesser demand. So aggregate demand is decreasing, firm is producing less. Recession के time पे firm will not employ any person just because their wages have decreased. Just because somebody is ready to work for you at a lower wage, you will not employ that person. Unemployment पे कोई effect नहीं पड़ेगा. Why? Because you already have that much factors of production. You already have that much labor in your factory which can increase the output to 100 units. Recession के time पे demand कम हुई है तो आपने 80 units produce करने start कर दिए. That means your labor is now relatively free. There is unutilized capacity in your economy. You can increase the output back to 100 units if required. अगर required है तो आप 100 units पे you can go back to 100 units if required without employing anybody else. The need for employment, there would be more employment generated only when the firm is required to produce more than 100 units. अगर firm को लगे कि demand 120 units की है, if firm thinks that the demand which is going to come would be of 120 units, only then firm will think about expansion, investment. Firm will think about investment. And when firm invests, only then new employment happens. New employment. New employment will occur only when firm decides to invest. If the firm does not invest, अगर firm invest नहीं करती है, if firm is not expanding, then there would be no new employment created by the firm. Firm is producing 80 units during recession. It can produce up to 100 units by utilizing its unused capacity. Why? Because its capacity was 100 units. तो अपनी capacity को पूरी तरह utilize करके firm can increase its output to 100 units. If there is requirement. In recession, it will not even be required to produce 100 units. जब 100 ही produce नहीं कर रहे हैं, there is no question of producing 120. And since there is no question of producing 120, firm will never take a decision to invest. Firm will never take a decision to invest, set up a new plant where new people can be employed. Therefore, a firm, because it will not invest, therefore no new employment will be created. कोई नई employment create नहीं होगी. Why? Because of unutilized capacity. The firm can increase its production to this level just by using the existing factors of production. Number one. Number two, Keynes' solution was the Keynesian solution. Keynesian solution क्या था? More government spending. More government spending. That this extra demand, इकोनॉमी की डिमांड कम हो गई है टू 80 यूनिट्स. इकोनॉमीज डिमांड हैज रिड्यूस्ड टू 80 यूनिट्स. प्लीज एवरीबॉडी, आई वुड वांट यू टू पे अटेंशन. ये रिपीट मत करवाना मेरे से चीज. इकोनॉमीज डिमांड हैज कम डाउन टू 80 यूनिट्स. द फर्म विल डिसाइड टू इन्वेस्ट, expand in setting up a new plant only when demand is 120 units. You need 40 extra units to be demanded in the economy. 40 डिमांड एक्स्ट्रा होगी तभी फर्म इन्वेस्ट करेगी एक्सपेंशन में. अगर 20 डिमांड ही एक्स्ट्रा आ रही है, फर्म विल नॉट इन्वेस्ट इन एक्सपेंशन. देयर मस्ट बी सम एक्स्ट्रा डिमांड विच फोर्सेस द फर्म टू इन्वेस्ट. दिस डिमांड, कीन सेज, शुड कम फ्रॉम गवर्नमेंट. Government should demand. Government spends in infrastructure, for example. Government spends in building road, building ports. When government spends, let's say, that will create more demand for cement industry, steel industry. Because of recession, very few people are constructing new houses. Normally, demand of cement was 100 tons per month. Because of recession, it has fallen down to 80 tons per month. I think this example will make things even more clear. Do you think the cement plant, the cement manufacturer will set up a new plant just because he is getting worker at low wage? Certainly not. He will set up this new plant of greater capacity only when there is a more demand. जब तक डिमांड ज्यादा नहीं आएगी, केवल इसीलिए क्योंकि पैसा सस्ते में मिल रहा है या फिर लेबर सस्ते में मिल रही है, just because of that will you set up a new factory? Certainly not. You will set up a new factory only when there is a reasonable chance that you will have your factory up and running. Demand would be extra and therefore you will sell from this factory. Only then you will spend. अगर सेल ही नहीं कर पाओगे तो सस्ती कॉस्ट हो चाहे महंगी कॉस्ट हो, लॉस तो लॉस ही है. कम लॉस है, ज्यादा लॉस है. This extra demand should come from government. If government starts to build road, that will create more demand for cement, more demand for steel. So now the cement industry can think about expanding, setting up a new plant. Why? Because the demand which was coming usually from households is now coming from government. So this was Keynesian solution. Government spending, government should spend. गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग का मतलब ये नहीं है कि सरकार सीमेंट खरीद के पी जाए, फेंक दे समुद्र में. दैट इज नॉट गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग. गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग इज गवर्नमेंट शुड स्पेंड समवेयर सो दैट इट लीड्स टू इंक्रीज इन डिमांड. Keynesian solution. But Keynesian solution also talks about a situation of liquidity trap. Liquidity trap. A firm will not invest just because money is available to it at a lower interest rate. A firm will invest only when it sees an additional demand, an extra demand. A firm will invest and therefore create new employment. Hence, the economy will come out of recession only when there is an extra demand. So demand is necessary. Demand is necessary. Extra demand is necessary. The demand is increased through the actions of government here, and monetary policy is also a demand side policy. As in monetary policy, if money supply increases, what is the objective? To increase demand. यही तो objective था monetary policy का हमने लिखा है. Monetary policy is a demand side policy, as in money supply increases, people have more money in their hand and therefore they start to demand more, they start to spend more. So aggregate demand increases. Why? Because more money is available and hence consumption expenditure increases, government expenditure, investment expenditure, any expenditure increase and therefore aggregate demand increases. So monetary policy भी एक demand side policy है. In order to increase demand, government will spend जिससे 120 यूनिट की डिमांड आए. At the same time, monetary policy will try to do what it can do. Monetary policy will increase money supply. Monetary policy will increase money supply so that people have money in their hand. And when people have money in their hand, then people will also start building their homes and therefore demand more cement. So one part of the extra demand of these 40 units comes from government spending, जो कि कीन्स ने बोला गवर्नमेंट को स्पेंड करना चाहिए. And another part of this extra 40 units comes from spending induced by easy monetary policy. Money supply increases and therefore people will spend. People have money in their hand. It is expected that people will spend and therefore demand will increase in the economy, which may force firms to expand, therefore create new employment, produce more output and hence bring the economy out of recession. यहां तक क्लियर है? यहां तक आई थिंक क्लियर होना चाहिए. Recap, just quick recap, 2-3 lines recap. A firm will not invest, economy will not come out of recession. A firm will not invest unless there is an extra demand. This extra demand, according to Keynes, must come from government. Why? Because anybody else is not willing to spend during the time of recession. Monetary policy will try to do its own bidding. Monetary policy will try to do whatever it can do. It will also increase money supply so that people have money in their hand and therefore people can also spend. Probably they will spend, they should spend. And when they spend, that will also increase demand and hence that may force firms to invest and therefore firms will employ more people, output will increase and therefore economy will come out of recession. Thinking तो यही है. लेकिन यही this was the thinking behind the operations of fiscal and monetary policy. Keynesian thinking that was there behind your operational monetary policy. But this did not seem to be working. You spent a lot, you increased money supply a lot and you spent a lot, but this did not result into desirable consequences. You expected economy to recover. You expected more demand to be there in the economy because government was spending a lot and monetary policy was printing a lot of money. You expected it to happen, but it did not happen. The question is why it did not happen. आपने Keynesian policy apply करी, आपको लगा कि ठीक हो जाएगा, but it did not happen. And because it did not happen, then you went for increasing the scale. Let's first understand why it did not happen. Why did monetary policy, to be precise, failed? We are in monetary policy discussion, तो monetary policy की बात कर रहे हैं. Why did monetary policy, to be precise, fail? Monetary policy is based on the actions of monetary authority are based on, in this situation, to increase money supply, which is expected to induce lending by the banks, which is expected to increase spending by households, which is expected to create additional demand, which is thus expected to increase output and thus bring economy back from recession. Please understand this flowchart. The action of monetary authority in such times is to increase money supply, which is expected to induce lending by the banks, which is expected to, banks will lend, which is expected to increase spending by the households. Increase spending by the households will lead to additional demand in the economy, which will lead to increasing output in the economy and therefore will bring the economy out of recession. This is what our expectation is. This expectation is based on this. यहां पे सबसे बड़ा impediment है monetary policy transmission. क्या पढ़ रहे हैं हम? Limitation of monetary policy. Monetary policy transmission. Increased money supply will translate from here to here only when there is increased lending by banks. If banks do not lend, then इसके आगे का कुछ नहीं चलेगा. If banks do not lend, then neither will there be increased spending, neither will there be increased additional demand, neither will the economy come out of recession. If banks do not lend. So this becomes the biggest impediment. The second impediment is willingness of the households to borrow. Willingness of banks to lend and willingness of the economy to borrow. Limitation of monetary policy. The effectiveness of monetary policy. Monetary policy will be effective only when banks are willing to lend and the economy is willing to borrow from the banks. Households or businesses, they are willing to borrow. Banks lend करना चाहते हैं और ये borrow करना चाहते हैं. Only then will this stage progress from here to here and then go there. अगर यहां पे ही willingness नहीं है, then करते रहो जितना money print करना है. In the first stage, the Federal Reserve realized that they had increased money supply by a lot. First phase mein, when 2008 mein they started with these programs of increased government spending and increased money supply, they realized that they have increased money supply by a lot already. But that did not result in increasing lending by the banks. Why? Because either banks were unwilling to lend or consumers were unwilling to borrow. समझ में आ रहा है? Limitations. Why would banks be unwilling to lend? Banks would be unwilling to lend because already there has been a collapse in banking system. And the collapse was there because banks lend to risky customers. दूध का जला छाछ भी फूक फूक के पीता है. Because banks had lent once and many had failed. Many big names had failed. Therefore, banks are right now very reluctant to lend. बिल्कुल lend नहीं करना चाह रहे. Banks are reluctant to lend. Unwillingness on banks' part to lend to the economy, number one. Number two, what about the people in the economy, the firms and the households? Households are unwilling to borrow because, again, दूध का जला छाछ भी. Households are unwilling to borrow because they don't see any certainty in their incomes. Most of the economy has collapsed. Therefore, पैसे वापस करने के लिए you need some certainty in your income. How will you return back money? Therefore, they don't see any certainty in their income. Number one. Number two, what about businesses? Businesses will not invest unless there is an extra anticipated demand. अभी डिस्कस किया हमने 80 to 120. Why will business borrow? A business will borrow only and only to expand, to invest money. There is no scope of investment when the economy is in a recession. Economy is going down or economy is in a very low level of equilibrium. There is so much spare capacity in the economy. No business would be willing to borrow money. So money supply by the Federal Reserve keeps on increasing, but that increase is not leading to either banks willing to lend or borrowers from the economy willing to borrow money. So the process of money creation is not happening. I think it was Manu who asked this question. Money multiplier less than 1. मेरे ख्याल से मनु आपने ही पूछा था क्वेश्चन. Money multiplier less than 1. What happened was, please understand, what happened was money supply increased many-fold. But जैसे हमारे रिवर्स रेपो ट्रांजैक्शंस होते हैं, रिवर्स रेपो में क्या है? Banks lend back to the central bank. Banks are lending back. Why? Because there is not enough demand. Same thing happens. Central bank is printing money, but banks are not lending money. In fact, what they are doing, they are lending back to the central bank. Money multiplier in American economy was somewhere around 0.9. 1 से कम. $100 were printed and only $90 went into the economy. Why? Because most of this money is going back to central bank in form of lending by the banks to their central bank. Money is not reaching here. Money यहाँ पे आ ही नहीं रहा है. Clear हो रही है चीजें? I sincerely hope, I expect that things would be clearer now. Would be clearer. I expect that you now are able to visualize monetary policy in action. Indian context में भी बता दें इसको. Indian context में. Demonetization. What happened in demonetization? In demonetization, during demonetization, people deposited cash which they held in banks. So let's say money supply is CC plus DD, currency in circulation plus demand deposits. Money supply does not change. Why? Because CC is now converted to DD. Currency in circulation जो थी, all of that goes back to the bank in form of demand deposits. But जैसे हमने पहले डिस्कस किया था, demand deposits and currency, they are similar as far as liquidity is concerned, but बहुत difference है दोनों में. Currency is in your hand to spend, but demand deposits are in bank's hand to lend. Difference है दोनों में, काफी बड़ा difference है. You have now given possession of your money to the bank, that bank can lend. It is your money, no doubt about it, but bank can lend that money, certainly yes. So banks are flush with deposits after demonetization. Interest rates that the banks are paying, they are quite low, but still banks have to pay interest on all the money that has returned back to them. अब बैंक के पास बहुत सारा पैसा आ गया, but what happened to lending, the credit in the economy? Lending did not increase. Banks were, in 2016 when demonetization happened, banks were quite reluctant to lend. In fact, banks did not lend money. मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी ट्रांसमिशन इज नॉट टेकिंग प्लेस. आरबीआई की सबसे बड़ी सरदर्दी है दैट मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी ट्रांसमिशन इज नॉट टेकिंग प्लेस इन इंडिया. व्हाई? बिकॉज बैंक्स ऑलरेडी हैव लॉट ऑफ डिपॉजिट्स विद देम. दे डोंट हैव द नीड टू गो एंड बोरो फ्रॉम आरबीआई एट रेपो रेट. अगर बैंक के पास बहुत सारे डिपॉजिट्स पहले से ही हैं, बैंक हैज लॉट ऑफ डिपॉजिट्स विद इटसेल्फ ऑलरेडी, would it feel the need to go to borrow from RBI? No. And if it doesn't need to borrow from RBI, how good is RBI changing repo rate? करते रहो repo rate को change. जब हमें लेना ही नहीं आपसे पैसा, I don't want to borrow money from you at repo rate, what effect will increase or decrease in repo rate have? Nothing. Zero. RBI will decrease repo rate in anticipation that money supply should increase, but money supply is not increasing. Why? Because monetary policy is not transmitting. Why? Banks already have lot of deposits. They are unwilling to lend those deposits. Banks do not lend their deposits. All your expectation is now faced with something very stark reality. समझ में आ रहा है ना? मुझे उम्मीद है कि समझ में आ रहा होगा. I sincerely hope that you are following, you are able to follow whatever I am telling you here. So post demonetization, what happens is banks are flush with cash, with so much deposits, but still credit does not pick up. Government comes out with so many schemes, Mudra Yojana जैसे सरकार लेके आई, that people would be given loans at a very low rate of interest, quick approval of loans. 2-3 साल पहले वो 59 minutes approval portal भी लेके आए थे. Last year I think approval within 1 hour, approval of loans. So government comes up with so many schemes with respect to approval of loan, disbursement of loans, so many schemes with respect to giving loans in rural areas. But there is lack of credit demand. Credit demand is not growing at a pace you would expect. ऐसा नहीं है कि इंडिया में नेगेटिव है, but yes, you expect it to grow at a higher pace. Why? Because banks are unwilling to lend. Why are banks unwilling to lend? इंडिया के केस में एनपीएस. विल डिस्कस व्हाट एनपीएस आर इन नेक्स्ट टू नेक्स्ट क्लास में. शायद हम एनपीएस डिस्कस कर रहे होंगे 2 classes फ्रॉम नाउ. Simply the reason being same, people who had borrowed money from the banks, they had not returned money, hence why would I lend money to you? मेरे पास इंटरेस्ट देने के पैसे नहीं आ रहे. आई एम नॉट एबल टू पे इंटरेस्ट एंड आई डोंट वांट टू लूज एनी मोर मनी बाय लेंडिंग टू somebody else. Banks will thus not lend money, and hence all this expectation comes to a naught. Next question is, what will banks do with this money? Sir, banks इस money का क्या करेंगे? There is lot of printing of money that goes on, as in, I'm sorry, not printing. There is lot of injection of money that goes on. In case of India, let's say lot of injection of banks are flush in India में there is no quantitative easing policy like that, but banks are still flush with deposits. There is lot of money with the banks, but that money is not in the economy. Purpose क्या है उस money को economy में भेजना? That is the purpose. Money is not coming to the economy. Now what happens? Now the central bank in America, that is the Federal Reserve, now they decide that because banks are unwilling to lend, people are unwilling to borrow, we will have to break this unwillingness. इस unwillingness को break करना होगा. And this unwillingness to lend and unwillingness to borrow will be broken when the amount of money that we inject is exponentially more than what we are injecting right now. I'll repeat. Central bank, Federal Reserve realizes that we have to break this unwillingness of banks to lend, unwillingness of borrowers to borrow. We have to break this unwillingness, and this unwillingness will have to be broken by sheer numbers. The amount of money that we are injecting in the economy, this money will have to increase drastically. Let's explain this drastic increase. This drastic increase, the increase in scale is nothing but quantitative easing. इसको हम quantitative easing बोलते हैं. Let me explain this increase in scale with first explaining to you what liquidity trap is. Although I have already explained what liquidity trap is, but यहाँ पे liquidity trap और relevant है. Liquidity trap की situation ही है ये. I'll explain first that why this is liquidity trap and why do you need QE and how does QE function? How does QE actually break this willingness? I sincerely hope you are following and sincerely hope, as I said, it's a fairly complex topic, but I'll try my best. It will be my endeavor to teach you this in as simple language as possible. I personally don't think that I have till now used anything which is out of the blue or extraordinary or as in difficult to understand. I don't think so. मैंने कोई ऐसी term कुछ भी चीज यूज करी है, Keynesian भी यूज किया, वो भी मैंने आपको दोबारा से explain कर दिया. Did not expect that you would be remembering it. I sincerely hope that you are comfortable in whatever we have discussed till this point. होप ही कर सकता हूं, आपको देख तो सकता नहीं हूं क्लास में. चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. Let's see. So we are seeing that central bank realizes that now what it has to do is to break this cycle, this stranglehold of unwillingness. And in order to break it, what it decides is that we must increase the scope of our operations, the scale of our operations. ये हमको break बहुत बड़ा करना पड़ेगा. Our money supply is increasing from 700 to 8 trillion to from 700 to 800 billion, from 800 to 900 billion. Now we need to go beyond this and we have to increase it big leaps and bounds. तो पहले 800 बिलियन डॉलर से वो इंक्रीज करेंगे 1.5 ट्रिलियन, ऑलमोस्ट डबल. 1.5 ट्रिलियन से दे विल फर्दर इंक्रीज इट टू 2 ट्रिलियन. फ्रॉम 2 दे विल फर्दर इंक्रीज टू 2.5, देन 3, then up to 4 trillion, 4 trillion dollars. Imagine the amount of money that they are pumping into the economy because they now expect that this has to be done at a bigger scale in order to break this unwillingness. I'll repeat, what is quantitative easing? Quantitative easing is simply pushing in more money at a much larger scale. मनी देना बैंक्स को वो तो आरबीआई का नॉर्मल काम है, फेडरल रिजर्व का नॉर्मल काम, दैट इज ओपन मार्केट ऑपरेशंस. नॉर्मली दे लेंड मनी और दे इंटरवीन इन द मार्केट, बाय एंड सेल गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटीज, इंट्रोड्यूस मनी, दैट इज द नॉर्मल वर्क. QE is merely a very big scale of that. At a very large scale, they are conducting this operation. Why are they conducting it at large scale? I'll repeat last time, to break this unwillingness, to break unwillingness of banks to lend or the borrowers to borrow. Let's see how it happens. Let's see. Let's go back to a discussion on liquidity trap. Liquidity trap पे वापस जाते हैं. If you remember from I think 6 classes back, हमने डिस्कस किया था money demand. Total money demand was money demanded for transaction plus money demanded for speculation. If you remember it correctly, money demanded for transaction purposes का money demanded was directly proportional to your money demanded for transaction was directly proportional to Y, as in your GDP, nominal GDP, directly proportional to Y, and this money demanded for speculation was inversely proportional to interest rates. ठीक है, this was directly proportional to your nominal GDP, money demanded for transaction, MDT, and MDS that inversely proportional to interest rate. ये हमने देखा था. If you look at total money demand में we know that it is dependent upon your nominal GDP level and inversely proportional to your interest rates. ठीक है, रिमेंबर हमने स्पेक्युलेटिव डिमांड का कर्व कैसे बनाया था, याद है? ग्राफ ऑफ स्पेक्युलेटिव डिमांड, इट वाज अ डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग कर्व विद रिस्पेक्ट टू इंटरेस्ट रेट. यहां पे आर था, यहां पे मनी डिमांड था, एंड दिस वाज दिस कर्व लाइक दिस. इनफैक्ट वी डू समथिंग लाइक दिस. रिमेंबर आर मैक्स, आर मिन, आर मैक्स, आर मिन. At R max, speculative demand was 0. At R min, speculative demand was infinitely elastic, as NCERT writes it. I hope you remember this thing. R min, R max. To quickly recap, when interest rates in the economy are high, listen carefully everybody, when interest rates in the economy are high, bonds become attractive. Why? Because now many people expect interest rates to fall and therefore bond prices to rise. जब interest rates high हैं, when interest rates are high, then bonds are attractive. Why? Because at this high interest rate, you expect एक्सपेक्टेशन इज इंटरेस्ट रेट विल फॉल इन फ्यूचर. अभी बहुत ज्यादा है, इंटरेस्ट रेट गिरेगा. जब इंटरेस्ट रेट गिरेगा, बॉन्ड विल बिकम रिलेटिवली मोर अट्रैक्टिव. बॉन्ड देयरफॉर विल बिकम मोर कॉस्टली. याद है ना वो डिस्कशन? इंटरेस्ट रेट जब 4% था, प्राइस ऑफ बॉन्ड वॉज 106 रुपीज. इंटरेस्ट रेट फॉल्स टू 3 रुपीज, 3%, price of bond goes to 107 rupees. Remember that discussion? So bond will become more attractive when interest rate falls. So people, when interest rate is maximum, when very high, then people will convert all their money into bonds or assets. Therefore, speculative demand of money would be zero, very less. And when interest rates are low, are minimum pay interest rates, then everybody expects interest rates to rise in future. Because you expect interest rates to rise in future, therefore you expect bonds to become unattractive in future, assets to become unattractive in future. Therefore nobody will invest their money in bonds, put their money in bonds. Everybody will pull out their money from bonds and keep it as cash with themselves. So this is what happens at R-min. ठीक है, अब तो recap हो गया. So this was our total demand of money dependent upon the level of GDP and your interest rates, inversely proportional to your interest rate. So for a moment, let me make this constant. इसको constant कर देते हैं. Let's assume that we are talking about some fixed level of GDP. इसको constant कर देते हैं. Let's plot the demand of money exactly like this. ये speculative demand थी और same curve ही मैं total demand का बना देता हूं. Total demand of money. Assuming Y is constant. So you have your money demand curve something like this. This is your money demand curve. Because Y is constant, तो Y0 यहां पे लिख दिया मैंने Y0. At a particular level of economic output, this would be your total demand. If output is higher, अगर ज्यादा है output, so maybe this would be your demand. Point is, it would be inversely proportional to interest rate. Interest rate के inversely proportional है. If Y1 है, Y1 greater than Y0, at a greater level of output, more demand. Why? Because it's directly proportional to output. At even a greater level of output, even more demand. But ये slope, ये shape, the shape would something like this. It would be downward sloping, certainly not, क्योंकि it's inversely proportional to interest rates. Okay, so let me draw this curve again. वहां पे 3 बना देते हैं, यहाँ पे एक बनाता हूं. Let's say this is your money demand, this is your interest rate, and this is your curve. This is your curve. Money supply is a determined variable, is a extraneous, not determined, I'm sorry. It's an extraneous variable. It is determined by RBI. RBI determines how much money is supplying in the economy. So money supply, it's a fixed number. ये money supply curve है. This is money supply. This is money demand. This is money supply. And the rate at which they intersect is called interest rate. ये हमारा nominal interest rate है, the interest rate which prevails in the economy. So money supply is this much, money demanded in the economy is this much. RBI decides to increase supply of money. जब money supply increase करेंगे, so this will become new level of money supply, MS1. Decides to increase further. भाई money supply क्या है? It is simply M.M0. broadly M.M0. So money multiplier है, money high powered money है, and that is the amount of money circulating in the economy. Amount of money circulating in the economy, and this becomes your money demand. Money supply increases further. Money supply increases further. Money supply increases further. यहां से यहां गई, यहां से यहां गई. You are increasing money supply. As central bank, you are increasing money supply. When you increase money supply, you expect market interest rates to fall. जब money supply increase कर रहे हो, when you are increasing money supply, you expect that market interest rate will fall. This line moves forward. You expect, this is your money demand curve. You expect interest rate will fall. आप expect कर रहे हो interest rate fall होगा. Market interest rate, ये repo rate नहीं है. This is not the interest rate set by RBI. This is market interest rate. Market में total economy में money demand, economy के अंदर money supply. So demand and supply curve are intersecting at the price of money. Demand for cars, supply for cars, they intersect at what point? Price of cars. Price of money is interest rate, market interest rate. This is market में जो interest rate है. So market interest rate would fall. अदर इंटरेस्ट रेट्स आर डिपेंडेंट अपॉन मार्केट इंटरेस्ट रेट. भाई मार्केट में क्या इंटरेस्ट रेट चल रहा है, यूजुअली कम है. जैसे आज की तारीख में टुडे यू वांट टू गो टू टेक अ हाउसिंग लोन, टुडे हाउसिंग लोन कैन बी अवेल्ड एट एज लो एज 6.5%. 1 year before or 1.5 year before today, nobody was going to give you a housing loan for 6.5%. आपको जाते तो आपको कम से कम नहीं तो 8.5-9% पे हाउसिंग लोन मिलता. Today, because money supply is so high in the economy, RBI has increased money supply so much, that is why market में interest rate on housing loan that you get is quite less. So RBI is increasing money supply. RBI is increasing money supply in anticipation that interest rates would fall. When market interest rates fall, listen very carefully everybody. When market interest rates fall, the expectation is people will borrow money, spend that money. Expectation क्या है? You want a fall in interest rates. You want interest rates in the market to fall because you expect, you want interest rates कम होंगे, housing loan पे interest rates will decrease, therefore people would be induced, incentivized to go and borrow from the bank so that they can buy a house. RBI is increasing money supply or Federal Reserve is increasing money supply in this anticipation. Money supply increase कर रहे हैं after 2007-2008 financial crisis और RBI is increasing money supply during the COVID crisis. For what? They are increasing money supply so that interest rates may fall. Interest rates may fall, market interest rates will fall, therefore people will be induced to borrow at these low interest rates. People will borrow, will spend and hence demand will increase in the economy. Economy के अंदर जो demand है, spending है, वो increase होगी if interest rates are low. If interest rates are low, people will borrow money. I will borrow money to, let's say, invest in stock market. I will borrow money to buy a fridge, buy a car, buy a house. I will borrow money for different purposes if interest rates are low, depending upon my eligibility and willingness of banks, obviously. But point is, if interest rates are low, my desire to borrow money would increase. अगर interest rate कम है, तो I would like to borrow money. So they are pushing interest rates down by increasing money supply. But what happens when money supply reaches this part of the curve, this flatter part of the curve? इस part of curve पे आके क्या हो जाएगा? When money supply reaches this flatter part of the curve, what happens now? In this part, money supply increases from here to here, then from here to here, then from here to here. But what about market rate of interest? Market rate of interest पहले यहां था, अब यहां से केवल यहां आया है. यहां से यहां पे तो ऑलमोस्ट इतना ही है और नेक्स्ट में तो बिल्कुल भी डिक्रीज नहीं हुआ, इट्स स्टिल स्टक हियर. लेट्स से आरबीआई टुडे, थिंक अबाउट इट, आई mix it up, keep on mixing it up with practical aspects of today's economy. RBI today is increasing. Since last year, RBI has increased money supply so much. Because of that, interest rates have fallen. Interest rates that banks are charging on the loans that they give are very low. हो सकता है कोई बैंक आपको आज की तारीख में 5% पे भी हाउसिंग लोन दे दे, मे बी. Interest rates have fallen. RBI is now continuing to increase money supply. But despite that, more fall in interest rate is not visible. जैसे 5% interest rate अगर हम मान लें, if we assume 5% interest rate is not falling below this 5% level. ये जो 5% का level है, this becomes like R minimum. In present scenario, this interest rate becomes like R minimum. RBI is still continuing to increase its money supply. But interest rate is not falling. Interest rate fall नहीं कर रहा है. And since interest rate is not falling, that means, listen very carefully everyone, since interest rate is not falling further, interest rate 5% से नीचे नहीं जा रहा है. Since interest rate is not falling further, therefore, no additional demand in the economy is being created. जिसे 5% पे बोरो करना था उसने कर लिया, लेकिन अब 5% के बाद nobody else is borrowing money. Why? Because the interest rate is not falling further. Let's say I would have borrowed when interest rate was 3% और 3% पे मैं I would have borrowed when interest rate reached 3%, but despite RBI's efforts to increase money supply, interest rate is not falling to 3%. Why? Because your money demand curve has become flat in this region. When it is reaching that R minimum region, जब R minimum पे आ गया है, at this point, this money demand curve has become flat. Since this curve has become flat, ये हम डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, we have discussed this. Since this curve has become flat, therefore interest rate does not fall below R minimum. Is that clear? This is what happens in liquidity trap. Liquidity trap deems monetary policy ineffective. When there is liquidity trap, monetary policy becomes ineffective. Why? What can monetary authority do? Monetary authority can at best increase money supply. Why? Because when increase money supply, that results in lower interest rates. भाई मनी सप्लाई इंक्रीज करके मेरी इनकम थोड़ी बढ़ जाएगी. Will my income or your salary, will it increase just because money supply is increasing? No. Money supply is increasing will not result in extra income for me. Money supply is increasing, that will result in fall of interest rates. Fall of interest rates would mean that people are tempted to borrow. People are tempted to borrow would mean people will spend. People will spend would mean firms will face more demand and hence more people will get employment. However, if interest rate does not fall below this level, अगर इस level के नीचे interest rate नहीं जा रहा है, then no effort in increasing money supply will be useful. You keep on increasing money supply, nothing will happen. Money supply increase करो, banks के पास पैसा पड़ा रहेगा. Nobody is willing to come and borrow from banks. Banks are not lending to anybody. अगर हो सकता है, maybe it's that people are willing to borrow. Maybe that banks are willing to lend. But nobody is willing to borrow. Why? Because interest rate is not falling below this number. And hence, monetary policy becomes ineffective monetary policy during the times of liquidity trap. Now, after 2007 financial crisis, in the year 2010, the Federal Reserve realized that their efforts at increasing money supply have reached the limits of monetary policy. The monetary policy has become ineffective. They realized कि monetary policy अब ineffective हो गई है. Why? Because interest rates are not falling further. Any increasing money supply is not translating to the banking system lending more money or more demand for borrowing coming into the banking system. Hence they said monetary policy is now ineffective. What to do now? अब क्या करें? And therefore they said now we need to increase the scale of this. इसका अब scale increase करना पड़ेगा. Scale कैसे increase करना पड़ेगा? पहले we were increasing it in this proportion. Now we will increase it to this proportion. Now money supply यहां से यहां आ जाएगी. And when this curve reaches there, then there might be some fall in interest rate, some measurable fall in interest rate. You will increase money supply by such a mammoth amount that at this point कुछ तो interest rate fall होगा ही होगा. And therefore there might be people who are willing to borrow at this lower interest rate. How will we reach this immense amount of money supply level and how will we break this unwillingness? ये unwillingness कैसे break करें और इस immense amount of money supply के ऊपर कैसे जाएं? The situation of liquidity trap, why it makes the monetary policy ineffective, and now comes QE. अब आएगा QE. अब आता है QE. It has become ineffective, but monetary authority, the Federal Reserve, is not yet ready to give up. Federal Reserve realizes कि हम effectiveness of monetary policy की limits पे हैं. Now monetary policy is becoming ineffective. It realizes that. But it is not ready to give up yet, and therefore it says, let's increase money supply manifold. तब देखेंगे क्या होगा. Interest rate क्या तब भी इतना ही रहता है या और कम होता है. Let's increase it manifold. Now let's see what happens in QE. अब हम देखते हैं QE में क्या होता है. Now let's see QE में क्या है? I hope this part should be clear to everyone. Now let's come to QE now. Quantitative easing. QE, quantitative easing. As I said, QE is just increased scale of operations. It's just an increased scale of operations of normal operations of central bank being carried out at a very large scale. That is what QE is, quantitative easing is. देखते हैं QE में क्या है. Banks are not lending money. What are banks doing with that money? There is a lot of money that has been pumped into the banking system. What are banks doing with that money? Banks कर क्या रहे हैं उस पैसे के साथ? अब if there is lot of money with the banks, there must be some way that they should use that money to earn some interest. They can keep money in the Federal Reserve, जैसे RBI में वापस रख सकते हैं. They can earn some interest, but that would be very low rate of interest. Maybe RBI says or the Federal Reserve says that no, from now onwards you are no longer required, you are no longer allowed to deposit money or lend money to us. You have to go and जबरदस्ती आपको कहीं और जाके इन्वेस्ट करना पड़ेगा. You have to lend money to somebody. We are not open. As in you cannot give money back to us. Maybe the Federal Reserve says this. So what are banks doing with that lot of money? Let's see what are banks doing. Banks are reluctant to lend to the economy. Banks are reluctant to lend to the economy. Unwillingness on the part of banks to lend in the economy. Now, when banks are reluctant to lend in the economy, where do they put their money? Where do they invest their money? Banks search for safe assets. Banks search for safe assets. Banks, all other financial institutions, they all search for safe assets. Safe assets. Why are they reluctant to lend? Because of risk. Therefore, they are searching for safe assets. Now, what is the safe asset? Safe asset is, or the safest asset is government bond. Safest asset is government bond. Government bond, why? Because you purchase a government bond, government will not default on that bond. Default as in, if it has promised to give you a payment and interest, it will certainly pay you that interest. So banks are searching for safe asset, and the safest asset is government bond. Now, what have banks done with all the money that has been pumped in yet? अभी तक जितनी भी मनी सप्लाई हुई थी, whatever extra money supply the central bank pushed into the economy, what did banks do with that money? Banks had purchased government bonds with that money. I'll repeat. Till now, till let's say 2010, अभी quantitative easing start नहीं हुई है. Till 2010, what have banks done with all the money that was pumped into the economy by the central bank? काफी सारा already बहुत सारा पैसा pump in कर लिया था. So what did banks do with the money till then? They were not lending, they were reluctant to lend. And therefore, what they were doing, they were searching for safe assets. Safest asset was government bond. Therefore, all banks and financial institutions purchased government bonds. सबने गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड परचेज कर लिए और गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड परचेज करके अब उसके ऊपर बैठे हैं. गवर्नमेंट इज सेइंग दैट वी विल गिव यू 2%, 3% रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट. आई एम हैप्पी विद दैट. I am happy. I have got money. I will purchase government bond. I will not lend it to a customer even if the customer is willing to pay 5, 6, 7, 10%. Why? Because that customer is risky. Government is not risky. It's risk free. I will not lend to any person. I will lend my money only to government. I will purchase government bonds and I will be content with 2-3% interest which I get from the government bond. This is in fact the cause of this reluctance. इस reluctance का cause क्या है? Banks being reluctant to lend. The cause is that there is available an alternate instrument where banks can put their money. समझो, realize करो. Banks reluctant क्यों है? Banks are reluctant because there exists an alternate forum, an alternate investment avenue where they can invest their money and earn even less but risk free return. तो ये एवेन्यू एग्जिस्ट कर रहा है. अच्छा, ये एवेन्यू एग्जिस्ट करना जरूरी भी है Existence of this avenue is necessary. Why? Because essentially what are government bonds? Government bonds are debt instruments. Debt instruments hai ye. These are debt instruments, as in they are a certificate showing that government has borrowed money. During these times, government, देखा हमने fiscal and monetary both. Government also needs to spend a lot of money. Fiscal policy, government is also required to spend. During recession, does government have its revenue? No. So government कैसे spend करेगी? Government will spend only by borrowing money or not? How will government spend money? Naturally, government doesn't have enough of its own resources during the time of recession. There is no tax which the government is able to collect. Nobody is paying income tax. Nobody is paying corporate tax. Government doesn't have its own resources in such times. Government, is it required to spend or not? Obama ji is the president. Is Mr. Obama required to spend? Yes, he does. Where will he spend his money from? Where will he get his money from? He'll get money only by borrowing. तो गवर्नमेंट ऐसा तो नहीं है कि गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड सेल करना बंद कर दे. Government needs money to spend, and therefore government bonds are necessary to exist. And because these are necessary to exist, banks will use their money to purchase as many government bonds. Banks are happy to lend money to government because government bond exist, और exist करना भी जरूरी है. Existence, ऐसा नहीं है कि आप बोलो कि गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड प्रिंट करना बंद कर दे. कैसे बंद कर दे भाई? गवर्नमेंट स्पेंड कहां से करेगी? So government needs to spend, for that it needs to borrow, and it gets money from banks at a very low rate of interest. And that makes all the money which banks or other financial institutions have go to the government rather than going to the economy. Reluctance का कारण समझ में आया? The reason for unwillingness, not just the reason was riskiness, risky asset, but how is that reluctance actually operating? Because banks have got an alternate avenue in form of government bonds. Now comes QE. अब आती है quantitative easing. The central bank says, तुमको government bonds खरीदने हैं ना, अब खरीदो. Central bank comes in as a, let's say, some mafia into the economy. It enters, it makes an entry, grand entry. अभी तक they were thinking that they are doing a lot, and now they say that okay, now we will assert our importance in the economy. Now they make an entry like तुमको करना है करो, अब करो. Central bank makes an entry through this policy of QE, quantitative easing. What it does through this QE is that it starts bond buying program. It starts bond buying program. Now, all the bonds of government which are right now there in the market, banks hold those bonds, financial institutions hold those bonds, anybody who holds those bonds, central bank now starts to buy those bonds. Central bank starts to buy those bonds, starts buying bond buying program, pushing up demand for bonds, All the bonds that exist will now be bought by central bank, pushing up demand and therefore pushing up price of bonds. So much so that, think about it, बैंक्स के पास एक गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड था जो कि बैंक ने $105 पे खरीदा था. बैंक्स हैड दैट गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड व्हिच दैट परचेज फॉर $105. $100 वर्थ गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड दैट परचेज फॉर लेट्स से $105. ठीक है, प्रीमियम पे खरीदा. एंड ऑन दिस दे वर कंटेंट विद अ यील्ड ऑफ लेट्स से 1%. 1% यील्ड से कंटेंट है भाई, सेफ है, इट्स सेफ, सो आई एम कंटेंट विद दिस 1% यील्ड. सो दे परचेज इट फॉर $105 एंड दे आर गेटिंग अ 1% yield on this. Central bank will enter the market and will start buying government bonds. Open market operation में क्या होता है? It buys or sell government bonds. Now it starts buying government bonds just at an immensely large scale. Quantitative easing. What it does is price of this bond goes up from, demand goes up because central bank is not directly buying bonds. It goes up from $105 to $110. $110 के ऊपर price चला गया. The money which banks would have earned, $5, money which banks would have earned in let's say 5 years, 5 साल में जो अगर $1 करके कमाते इस बॉन्ड से, if government was paying interest, $1 जो बैंक 5 साल में कमाते, central bank has pushed up the bond prices so much that banks would be certainly willing to sell the bonds to the central bank. Why? Because they are making an immediate gain of $5 here. Immediate $5 का gain है, immediate, versus $5 जो आप अगले 5 साल में कमाओगे. क्या बेहतर है? It's obviously better that you purchase this, that you sell your bond today. Why? Because central bank's bond buying program has pushed up the price of bonds so much. Central bank indulges in bond buying at a grand scale, and that leads to lot of central bank will buy bond, therefore it will introduce money in the economy. Banks will now sell their bonds to the central bank, and now banks will have lot of cash in their hands. Step number 1. Step number 2, what will banks do with this cash which they have now? They will now search for other safe assets. अभी भी safe asset ही ढूंढेंगे, अभी भी lend नहीं करेंगे. They will now search for other safe asset. After government bonds comes, let's say, AAA rated corporate bond. AAA corporate bonds. Corporate bonds. Let's say Apple, Google. Let's take these companies. Now there is very less chance of failure of these companies. इन companies के failure का बहुत ही कम chance है. Apple हो, Google हो, maybe even Tesla today. So Facebook, Amazon, these companies have very less chance of failure. These companies also issue bonds. These companies also want money, and therefore they also issue bonds. Like government borrows, these companies also borrow from the market by issuing bonds. So there are corporate bonds, AAA rated. AAA is the best rated bonds. Best AAA, AA plus, A double plus, very good rating bonds. AAA best rating है, AAA से नीचे जैसे आ जाती है AA plus. ठीक है, AA plus, उसके बाद AA minus, AA, इस टाइप से रेटिंग आ जाती है. Point is, these are all very secure, very safe. Just that government has very less chance of default. Corporate bonds have a little bit negligible, but let's say more than government. Banks or financial institutions will now use the money which they have got from this bond buying program of government, of the RBI. That money they will use to buy corporate bonds. Now central bank will still see, अभी भी तुमने lend नहीं किया market के अंदर, हम फिर घुसते हैं. What will central bank do? Central bank will start purchasing these bonds. Bond buying program will now extend to such corporate bonds, other securities which banks were buying. Anything which the bank is buying, central bank is now buying that thing. Any asset which the bank is buying, central bank will come into the market and buy that asset. Therefore, it will now it will break that unwillingness by forcing the banks to lend. How is it forcing the banks? Because it is closing all other avenues of the bank to invest its money. गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड में नहीं कर सकते क्योंकि हमने सारे खरीद लिए. कॉर्पोरेट बॉन्ड में नहीं कर सकते क्योंकि हमने सारे खरीद लिए. And therefore, what is left for you is now you go and lend money to riskier people जो इसके नीचे आते हैं, उनको lend करो. Go and invest in other corporate bonds. Go and lend to retail borrowers. Why? Because now you are being forced, because all other avenues have been closed. How have they been closed? They have been closed because they become quite costly, and it was lucrative for the bank to sell this. It was lucrative for the bank to sell this corporate bond, to sell the government bond to the government, back to the Federal Reserve. $105 का वो था, मान लो $107 का ये है, इसका प्राइस $112 हो गया है. फेसबुक का बॉन्ड है, कॉर्पोरेट बॉन्ड, it was purchased by the bank for $107. Because now Federal Reserve has entered the market, it has jacked up its price to $112. So its price increases, therefore banks देखेंगे भाई $5 extra $5 immediately मिल रहे, certainly why would not they sell? They would certainly sell. And therefore now they would be quote unquote forced to lend to others, that is into the economy. Rather than going for these safe assets, they would now be forced to lend to the economy. At least lend to those who are willing to borrow. And this is how quantitative easing works. This is what QE is, quantitative easing. Quantitative easing is a bond buying program or an asset buying program of the central bank through which it carries out its open market operations, under which it buys bonds and prints money and injects it into the economy at a very large scale. It is the scale the scope of bond buying and printing money, which makes it different from its normal open market operations. The scale is so big because it wants to break that unwillingness of the banks to lend money to their to the borrowers. समझ में आया क्या है? It's still not over. I'll still continue. क्या समय हुआ है? It's 7 o'clock. अभी कंटिन्यू कर लेते हैं. क्लास जल्दी छोड़ दूंगा. क्लास I'll leave early, a little bit early. अभी कंटिन्यू कर लेते हैं. अगर प्रॉब्लम नहीं हो तो, if there is no problem, then I can continue now. Questions I'll try to answer. It's still not over. It's still not over. It's still remaining. Some part is remaining. As in the effect of Federal Reserve monetary policy on Indian economy. All those things are part of this quantitative easing. So I'll discuss that as well. चलो ठीक है. Thank you so much. You have given me permission to continue. Thank you so much. I'll leave the class a little bit early. 15 मिनट जल्दी छोड़ दूंगा. I'll leave the class a little bit early. ब्रेक नहीं लेते हैं क्योंकि फिर मोमेंटम ब्रेक हो जाता है. ठीक है, मोमेंटम ट्रैप में हम फंस जाएंगे नहीं तो. I'll also answer your questions. About 20-25 minutes of this discussion is remaining. ठीक है, and then I'll answer your questions. I think that there would be many. I'll answer your questions. Don't worry about it. Okay, so let's see. Let's carry on from carry on. So RBI, the central bank indulges in quantitative easing through which it buys assets at a very large scale. देखो, money created in this, ये question, this is the one of the easiest question that can be asked regarding quantitative easing. They don't actually print currency, as in physical currency print नहीं करते. It is an electronic transfer of money. This kind of question may be easiest of easy questions. ठीक है, they don't actually print any money, as in physically print banknotes or dollars. What they do is they simply digitally credit the bank account. I purchase bond, I will digitally credit your bank account with that, your account with that money, rather than giving you currency. So that's something to take note of. Actual currency print नहीं होती है, केवल digital transaction होगा. Anyways, so central bank indulges in a very big scale bond buying or asset buying program through which it prints lot of money, pushes up the price of assets so that banks are forced to sell them to the central bank, and therefore in the process banks are now flush with lot of money, which they have nowhere else to lend but to the economy. Rather than putting that money in safe assets, banks will now be forced to lend that money into the economy. So their reluctance would be broken. Number one. Number two, what about interest rates? हमने पिछली स्लाइड में देखा था ना, interest rates do not fall, and I said when this quantity increases then interest rates are expected to fall. What about interest rates? What happens to interest rates here? Reluctance on part of borrowers, थोड़ा सा पार्ट उसका बचा है. Yes, the reluctance is on part of borrowers is not that big an issue as far as reluctance on part of banks is concerned. But since we are discussing this, let's also discuss reluctance. Let's also discuss the interest rate component. You had a government bond. Let's say we are right now in, let's say, 2021. You are in 2021 and government comes out with a bond. Everybody please pay attention. Bonds का भी revision हो जाएगा. Government comes out with a bond which says face value of 100 rupees, time of let's say 10 years, 10 साल का time period है, and interest that it pays is let's say 5%, 5% interest है. So we have a government bond in 2021. Government has come up with a bond today. Present day bond is, its face value is 100, its time period is 10 years, and the interest which it pays is 5%. ठीक है? Let's assume whatever the market interest rate is when this bond is introduced in the market. जब ये bond market में आया है, then its value, price of this bond, premium जो है bond का, let's say bond is now sold at the premium of 2 rupees. 2 रुपए के प्रीमियम पे सेल हो रहा है. As in this bond is available for 102 rupees. Price of bond in market is 102 rupees. 102 रुपए का बॉन्ड मिल रहा है. When this bond is sold for 102 rupees, लास्ट टाइम जब मैंने बॉन्ड बताया तो आपने बोला था सर वो इंटरेस्ट रेट कैलकुलेशन आपने एग्जैक्ट नहीं किया था. प्लीज फॉरगिव मी, वो एग्जैक्ट नहीं, आई एम डूइंग अप्रॉक्सीमेट सिंपल कैलकुलेशन. इंटरेस्ट कितना पे कर रहा है ये? 100 रुपए पे 5 रुपए. इट इज पेइंग एन इंटरेस्ट ऑफ 5 रुपीज ओवर 100 रुपीज. 5 रुपए का इंटरेस्ट पे कर रहा है. प्रीमियम दैट यू हैव पेड इज 2 रुपीज. Therefore, effectively, how much will you earn? You will earn effectively 3 rupees. Effectively 3 rupees earn करोगे. 2 रुपए महंगा आपने खरीदा है. You have paid 102. The bond has promised 5%, that is 5 rupees on 100. Since you have paid 2 rupees extra, you will earn 5. Your effective earning, your yield is 3 rupees. ये आपकी yield है. 3 रुपए आपकी yield है. ये हम डिस्कस, दिस वी हैव डिस्कस्ड ऑलरेडी हाउ यील्ड इज कैलकुलेटेड. प्रीमियम ऑफ बॉन्ड और द प्राइस ऑफ बॉन्ड, प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ बॉन्ड, ये भी हमने डिस्कस किया था डिपेंडिंग अपॉन मार्केट इंटरेस्ट रेट. सो 3 रुपीज इज योर यील्ड. नाउ थिंक अबाउट इट. अ पर्सन हु होल्ड्स बॉन्ड एट प्रेजेंट, दिस 102 रुपीज, लेट्स से पर्सन 1 परचेज दिस बॉन्ड. पर्सन 1 ने इस बॉन्ड को परचेज किया. Person 1 purchased this bond for 102 rupees, and let us assume person 1 intends to hold this bond, doesn't intend to sell it, intends to hold this bond. Person 1 intends to hold this. How much will he earn? He will effectively earn 3 rupees. Effectively 3 rupees earn करेगा. Keep this in mind that he will effectively earn 3 rupees. 3 rupees is the yield. Keep this in mind. Now, scenario 2. Now we are in 2022, 2022 में है. Person 1 is still holding to this bond which government issued in 2021. 2021 में सरकार जो बॉन्ड लेके आई थी. Person 1 is still holding on to this bond. His yield is 3%. 3 rupees he is earning, 3% is his yield. Now, government comes up with a new bond. Government comes up with a new bond in 2022. The bond which government comes up with in 2022 is face value 100. Let's say time period is again 10 years. What will be the interest? What will be the interest? सोचो इस बारे में. Please think about it. The bond which already exists in the market. This bond is bond which already exists in the market. ये already exist कर रहा है. The bond that already exists is paying to its holder a return of 3%. The bond that already exists is paying to its holder a return of 3%. Yield is 3%. At what rate can the government introduce a new bond so that this bond will also be sold? अगर सरकार इस पे इंटरेस्ट, if government gives interest on this which is equivalent to 2%, अगर सरकार इस पे 2% इंटरेस्ट देती है, nobody will be interested to buy this bond. Why? Because the present bond gives 3% interest, 3% effective yield. Nobody will be willing to buy this bond. Why? Because जो present bond है, जो existing bond है, वो 3% yield दे रहा है. If government gives 4% interest on this, government gives 4%, everybody would want to sell this and redeem this bond, and everybody would want to purchase this bond 4% के ऊपर, क्योंकि ये ज्यादा इंटरेस्ट पे कर रहा है. Think about it. The government can issue this bond at an interest rate of 3% or not. In fact, it will issue this bond at the interest rate of 3%. क्योंकि existing bond जो है, the bond that already exists in the market, that bond is giving a 3% yield. That would mean, that is, it can be understood as existing bond is giving a 3% return. That means the holder of the bond, सरकार तो भले ही 5% पे करी, the government is paying 5%, but the holder of this bond is effectively getting 3%. That means holder is content with 3%. Holder 3% से content है, संतुष्ट है. अगर होल्डर 3% से संतुष्ट है तो सरकार को क्या जरूरत पड़ी है 4% पे इंटरेस्ट पे करने की? Same thing in English. If holder is content with a 3% yield, which he is presently earning on the existing bond, what need does the government have to introduce a new bond at a higher rate of interest? Government would be quite happy to introduce bond at 3% rate of interest. Why? Because the present buyer, present holder is content with it. The point is, when yield of a bond is there, whatever yield of the bond is there, that yield is reflective of, that yield is a measure of at what rate new borrowing will be done by the government. Whatever yield is there of the existing bond, जो existing bond है उसकी जो भी yield है, existing bond की जो भी yield है 3% in this case, whatever the yield of the existing bond is, that is in fact the interest rate at which new bond can be and will be introduced in the market. So the existing yield gives an indication of the interest rate of a new bond. If a bond is introduced today, then it will be introduced at the rate at which what is the yield of existing bond. आज की तारीख में जो bond exist कर रहा है उस पे क्या yield है, that is the interest rate on which new bond will be introduced. Now, if yield is lower, अगर yield कम हो जाती है, from 3% it goes down to 2%, from 2% it goes down to 1%. If yield of a bond decreases, then it will give an opportunity to the government to issue bond at a lower rate of interest or not. अगर bond की yield, if yield of an existing bond decreases, the bond which is existing, अभी जो है market में, the bond that exists in the market, if yield of this bond decreases, then it gives an opportunity to the government to issue new bond at this lower yield, at a lower rate of interest. नया bond जब सरकार लेके आएगी, government will give only 1% interest on this bond. Why should it give 2 when the present bond is giving 1%? The buyer is content with this. So नए bond के ऊपर सरकार केवल 1% interest देगी. Does that not make borrowing for the government cheaper? Government will be able to borrow. Government will be able to borrow. Will be able to borrow at a lower interest rate or not? Depending upon what is the yield of existing bond, if the yield falls down, government will be able to borrow at a lower interest rate क्योंकि yield कम हो गई है. Therefore, government can introduce a new bond and government will be paying only 1%. पुराने वाले पे 5% पे कर रहे थे, नए वाले पे केवल 1% ही पे करेंगे. Because for the holder, here he also gets effectively 1%, here he will effectively get 1%. So why should government give any more? Falling yield will make raising debt cheaper. Falling yield will make raising new debt cheaper. Now, why will yields fall? ये डिस्कस कर चुके, this we have already discussed. Why will yields fall on a bond? Yields will fall when bond become costlier. 102 का bond 103 में बिक रहा है अब. Yield decreases from 3 to 2, 5 rupees interest, 3 rupees is the premium that you pay. Yield decreases to 2 rupees. Effectively, you will earn only 2 rupees now. You have paid 3 rupees premium over 100, whereas you will get 5. ये 5 रुपए तो fixed है, ये आपने अब ज्यादा पे किया है, so you will effectively earn only 2 rupees. Price of bond increases to 104. Yield comes down to 1 rupees only. 1%. It will enable the government to issue new bond at only 1% rate of interest. yield becomes, price of bonds becomes 105 rupees. Yield is zero now. Enable the government to issue new bonds at 0% rate of interest. अगर yield इसका प्राइस 105 रुपए हो गया है, it will enable the government to issue new bond at 0% rate of interest. You can extend this, but that is highly unlikely. Price becomes 106 rupees. 106 रुपए का प्राइस हो गया. How does it become? We'll talk about it. This bond is giving a negative yield now. नेगेटिव यील्ड है इस बॉन्ड की, 5 रुपए इंटरेस्ट है, 106 रुपए का बॉन्ड है. क्यों हुआ है? कोई पागल ही है जिसने खरीदा है. वो पागल कौन है हम डिस्कस कर चुके हैं. अगर इस बॉन्ड का प्राइस 106 हो जाए, इट बिकम्स अ नेगेटिव यील्ड बॉन्ड. enables government to issue new bond at 0 or negative rates of interest. समझ में आया? नेगेटिव रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट सुनते हैं हम कई बार न्यूज में. नेगेटिव इंटरेस्ट रेट्स. Yield becomes negative, enables government to issue bonds at a negative rate of interest. Is it clear or not? Is it clear? Essentially, in this case, government will issue bonds at a premium. 100 रुपए का बॉन्ड है, सरकार आपको बोलेगी 102 रुपए दो और मैं आपको 100 रुपए वापस करूंगी. Government will issue bonds at a premium. It so happens government many times issues bond at a discount also. सरकार 100 रुपए का बॉन्ड है, उसको 98 रुपए में भी इशू करती है डिस्काउंट, but it can certainly issue at a premium as well. If this is the case, if highly unlikely कि बॉन्ड का प्राइस 106 हो जाएगा, highly unlikely, completely unlikely, market doesn't allow it to go to 106 rupees, but you can visualize the scenario. लेकिन हां 105 को तो जरूर अप्रोच कर सकता है, 105 को तो it can certainly approach. 104, 104.5, 104.8, 104.9, it can certainly approach 105, making the yield on this bond extremely small, 0.1%, 0.2%, 0.3%, enabling the government to issue new bond at such low rates of interests. How will this price increase? कैसे होगा प्राइस? 102 से 103, 104, 105 कैसे होगा? If there is some buyer in the economy who has lots of money in his pocket, only that person can buy. Who is that buyer? Central bank is that buyer. Through quantitative easing, the central bank will purchase these bonds en masse, pushing up the price of these bonds, reducing the yields of these bonds, enabling the government to issue new bond at low rate of interest. Government ने नए रेट पे इंटरेस्ट किया, corporate bond, enabling the corporate to issue bonds at a lower rate of interest. Even lesser secure corporate bond, enabling them to issue bond at a lower rate of interest, pushing the market interest rates down further. Market interest rates, which were not coming down because of increasing money supply, will start to come down because bonds price has been jacked up by purchasing programs of the central bank, leading to fall in interest rates, or at least expected fall in interest rates. Certainly it does lead to fall in interest rates. This is what quantitative easing is, QE. Whether or not QE has succeeded, what are the problems with QE or issues with QE? Certainly this is a big area of debate, academic debate. We cannot go into this, but small part I can certainly tell. There's a very real risk of hyperinflation with quantitative easing. क्यों? क्योंकि क्वांटिटेटिव ईजिंग में मनी सप्लाई इकोनॉमी में बहुत ज्यादा है. द अमाउंट ऑफ मनी अवेलेबल इन द इकोनॉमी इज इमेंसली लार्ज. देयर कैन बी सम साइन इन द इकोनॉमी ऑफ लेट्स से रिकवरी, एंड ऑल दिस मनी में इमीडिएटली बी यूज्ड टू, जो डिमांड इंक्रीज नहीं हो रही थी एकदम से हो सकता है डिमांड इंक्रीज कर जाए. डिमांड इंक्रीज नहीं हो रही, इसलिए आपने क्या किया? यू आर फीडिंग. थिंक अबाउट इट. देयर इज सम there is some sleeping dinosaur, or there is some sleeping large animal. You are continuing to feed that animal in expectation कि उठ नहीं रहा है, क्यों नहीं उठ रहा है? So you have continued to feed that animal. If it wakes up, it might become very violent. It may start attacking you as well. So quantitative easing is like a double-edged sword. It might lead to hyperinflation, immediate hyperinflation. That's one aspect of quantitative easing. Another aspect of quantitative easing is, जैसे हमने डिस्कस किया था, that banks are buying corporate bonds, banks are buying government bonds, banks are buying corporate bonds, then banks are buying more riskier corporate bonds. So banks are, or financial institutions are, always looking for avenues to invest their money apart from in the economy. One of that avenues is developing markets, developing countries. Globalized world, money flows freely now between countries. If there is quantitative easing in USA, that would mean money is available freely and in very large quantity in USA. Banks के पास बहुत सारा पैसा है in USA, but just that they are not reluctant to invest that money in American economy. American economy में invest नहीं करना चाहते हैं. They are not ready to give to their clients because of risk. Certainly open to giving money to, let's say, foreign clients in India. Where will that money come? That money will come to Indian stock market. Money is freely available to financial institutions in US. Financial institutions in US will not invest, quote unquote, will not invest their money in American market. Why? Because American market is not growing. Not expected to get them good returns. Interest rates बहुत कम है, therefore returns would also be very less. The safest avenue is government bond, और government bond पे वहां पे 0.25% इंटरेस्ट है, जीरो के बराबर. रियल टर्म्स में जीरो है. रियल इंटरेस्ट रेट अगर कैलकुलेट करें तो इट्स जीरो. Interest rate which government bond pays is 0.25%. Inflation is, let's say, 1%. Real interest rate is minus 0.75. Minus 0.75 real interest rate. So in real terms, you would be losing money if you buy a government bond. Why? Because inflation is 1 and government bond gives you 0.25. That means other returns, other interest rates, all would be very less in American economy. What will this large amount of money do lying idle? A big part of this money would go to shores of developing countries, would go to Turkey, would go to Malaysia, would go to China, would come to India and be invested in these economies. Money available free of cost in USA, not ready to be invested in US, but will be invested in other economies which have brighter prospects. लेकिन यहां पे कहां इन्वेस्ट होगा? It will be invested in Indian stock market, pushing up prices of Indian stocks or Indian assets through the roof, buying Indian government bonds, reducing yields of Indian government bonds. So money will be invested in Indian markets, in developing countries market. Step number one. Step number two. What if American economy shows signs of recovery? If American economy shows signs of recovery, then this quantitative easing program will start to be withdrawn or not. Central bank will reduce its pace of buying assets, will stop buying assets, will maybe now even start to sell these assets. हो सकता है बाद में sell भी करने start कर दें. अभी तो they are not even thinking about selling these assets. They are simply talking about, word क्या सुनते हैं हम न्यूज में? टेपर. टेपर वर्ड सुनते हैं ना? फेडरल टेपर, टेपर टेंट्रम्स. क्या है टेपर? टेपर मीन्स टू रिड्यूस द पेस. Federal Bank is saying, Federal Reserve is saying, not Federal Bank, Federal Reserve, American Central Bank is saying that American economy is showing signs of recovery. And because they are saying it's showing signs of recovery, therefore they say that we might slow down our asset purchase program. We might increase interest rates. We might reduce money supply, increase interest rates. What is that a signal of? That is a signal of healthier American economy. Well, if American economy becomes healthier, what will happen to all that free money which is invested in India, in Turkey, in Japan, in Malaysia? American financial institutions have invested so much free money in India because they did not expect American assets to give them favorable returns. They expected Indian assets to give more returns, इसीलिए इंडिया में पैसा इन्वेस्ट किया. फ्री का पैसा था, इंडिया में इन्वेस्ट किया, अमेरिका में इन्वेस्ट नहीं किया. Now, American economy is giving signs of recovery, that it is going to improve. What will happen? Pull out this money from India and invest in America. When this pull out happens from India, what will happen? Flight of dollars. एकदम से डॉलर्स जो है इंडियन इकोनॉमी से बाहर चले जाएंगे. Immediately creating a huge supply deficit, demand supply deficit. एकदम से डॉलर्स की डिमांड बहुत बढ़ जाएगी क्योंकि बाहर जाने हैं, सप्लाई आनी, जो अभी फ्री डॉलर्स आ रहे हैं वो अब बंद हो जाएंगे. Effect on Indian economy, Indian rupee. Turkish currency fell last year or last to last year by 40%. Why? Because immediately lot of dollars flew out of from Turkey. Effect of quantitative easing. For their economy, it might cause hyperinflation. For other economy, rest of the economy, it might cause an unstable currency. That's what QE is, quantitative easing. Chalo, it's 7:28. With this, I have come to the end of quantitative easing. Now I'll answer your questions. अब मैं आपके क्वेश्चन आंसर करता हूं QE के रिस्पेक्ट में. Now I'll answer your question. This is the end of QE. In fact, this is the end of our discussion on monetary policy as well. Some topics might remain. अगर कोई रह जाएगा तो then I'll see whatever is remaining. I'll try to address that question, cover up that topic as well. But with this, we have come to the end of discussion of QE, quantitative easing. I hope this was clear to everybody. लिखो, पहले लिखो, just write down. I'll dictate what QE is and then I'll answer your questions. Write down. Give heading quantitative easing. Give heading quantitative easing. Write down. QE is an unconventional monetary policy. QE is an unconventional monetary policy used in abnormal times. QE is an unconventional monetary policy used in abnormal times. Full stop. आगे लिखो. It is a tool. It is a tool. It is a tool with the central bank. It is a tool with the central bank to increase money supply, at an unprecedented scale. It is a tool with the central bank to increase money supply at an unprecedented scale. Full stop. Next paragraph में, the need for QE arises due to ineffectiveness. The need for QE arises due to ineffectiveness of the conventional tools of monetary policy. The need for QE arises due to ineffectiveness of the conventional tools of monetary policy, especially during the situation of a liquidity trap. Especially during the situation of a liquidity trap. Full stop. During a recession, comma, the central bank conducts monetary policy, during a recession, the central bank conducts an expansionary monetary policy. The central bank conducts an expansionary monetary policy. Full stop. The expectation is 15 minute और पढ़ूंगा, total 15 minute. I'll leave. I promise I will leave. Even if I'm dictating, I will leave at 7:45. I know you are tired. I promise I'll leave at 7:45. Okay? The expectation, please bear with me for 15 more minutes, please. The expectation is that increased money supply that increased money supply will result in falling of interest rates. Increased money supply will result in falling of interest rates, which would then induce people to borrow, which would then induce people to borrow and spend, and thus push up the aggregate demand, and thus push up the aggregate demand. Full stop. However, if the banks are unwilling to lend, if the banks are unwilling to lend due to their risk averse behavior, if banks are unwilling to lend due to their risk averse behavior, then such objective of an expansionary monetary policy, will not be achieved. Full stop. Next paragraph, change the paragraph, write down. The central bank tries to break this reluctance. The central bank tries to break this reluctance by increasing the scale of money supply, manifold, manifold, by increasing the scale of money supply manifold. Full stop. It does so by buying all those assets. It does so by buying all those assets such as government bonds, by buying all those assets such as government bonds from the market. Full stop. As a result, their price increases. And therefore the bank's willingness, and therefore the banks के ब्रैकेट में लिखना holders, and therefore the banks bracket में holders, banks willingness to sell them increases. Full stop. Even if the banks buy riskier assets, like corporate bonds, comma, the central bank may be open to buying them as well. The central bank may be open to buying them as well. Full stop. The objective is to finish. The objective is to finish all those avenues. The objective is to finish all those avenues where banks can put their money. The objective is to finish all those avenues where banks can put their money and not lend to the economy. Full stop. When such avenues such as government and corporate bonds, are purchased by the central bank, comma, then the banks have nowhere but to put their money in riskier assets, and hence their risk averse behavior to not lend is addressed, that is broken. Full stop. Next paragraph. Bond buying by the central bank also results in lower yields on existing bonds. Bond buying by the central bank also results in lower yields on existing bonds, and thereby enabling government and corporates to issue new bonds at a much lower interest rate, bracket में that is the yield on existing bond, full stop. Next paragraph. QE is a double-edged sword. QE is a double-edged sword, as it may cause. QE is a double-edged, दो धारी तलवार. QE is a double-edged sword, as it may cause runaway hyperinflation, in the economy, full stop. At the same time, since QE involves large quantity of cheap money, large quantity of cheap money, comma, this money also finds its way. This money also finds its way into other economies. This money also finds its way into other economies where it is invested, in anticipation of, higher returns, than what may be earned, in the domestic economy, full stop. If the domestic economy recovers, comma, then such money invested in foreign markets, flees back to its domestic shores, comma, causing a currency crisis, in that foreign country, full stop. ठीक है? This is about QE. As I said, it's still one minute that remains. 1 minute अभी बचा है. With this we are done. I have dictated as well. Please, I'll leave the class. मैं class छोड़ रहा हूँ. I'll answer 2-3 questions. I'll answer those questions as quickly as I can. I think most of them would have been answered. I'm leaving the class. Please read what I have dictated, and then whatever questions regarding QE you have, please ask in next class. Tomorrow's class, आज की class काफी, I think it's everybody is tired. I am certainly a little bit exhausted. I think you would also be. काफी content heavy class थी, लेकिन उन्होंने लिख भी लिया है, and that is good. We've been able to write what we discussed so that we shall be able to revise, recap whatever we have discussed. ठीक है? I'll answer your questions and then we'll leave. ठीक है? फटाफट आंसर करता हूं. अभिनव का क्वेश्चन है, सर, as there was news that new parliament is going to be built, is that a government spending during COVID times whenever economy was declining? Yes, बिल्कुल अभिनव, certainly yes. New parliament building expenditure, that is an example of government spending money during the times to increase demand. That is creation of new infrastructure. That is the best way through which government can spend money. We can always debate which infrastructure do we want. Do we want to construct new highways? Do we want to construct something else? We can always debate upon that. But as far as, if you ask my view, I don't think so there is any crunch of funds as far as other infrastructure construction is there. Other infrastructure construction, for example, construction of roads, ports, anything, that is also going on at its full capacity. So I don't think so that it would be, I don't think so that it's bad to construct a parliament building. I mean, we can always debate about that, but as far as it being an effective policy measure to pump up the economy, certainly yes. During COVID times, I think about 800 crores is the total cost of that building. So 800 crore ka kharcha, that is meager, but still will create jobs, will create extra demand. So I think that should be good, that should be okay. डिबेट हम जरूर कर सकते हैं, बट देखो 800 करोड़ का अमाउंट है, पहली बात तो मीगर अमाउंट है, दूसरी बात बाकी किसी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट के अंदर कोई पैसे की कमी नहीं है. एज इन वॉट एवर वेर एवर मनी हैज टू बी स्पेंट इज बीइंग स्पेंट. वी कैन ऑलवेज डिबेट कि भाई आपको और करना चाहिए, बट आई डोंट थिंक दैट देयर इज एनी एवेन्यू ऑन विच गवर्नमेंट इज नॉट स्पेंडिंग एनफ. ठीक है, सो दैट्स योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज परफेक्टली राइट. नेक्स्ट अनस का क्वेश्चन है. अनस इज आस्किंग, सर एज यू सेड increase lending by banks and increase spending by households led to bring back economy from recession, but when banks again give loan to risky person to break unwillingness by people to take loan, then again risky people are unable to pay back loan, then again bank got lost, then will it not lead to worse recession? Yes Anas, you are absolutely right. Risk averse behavior खत्म कर रहे हैं बैंक का, but that doesn't mean that risk is less. That doesn't mean risk is less. We'll discuss this in banking, that now you are better prepared to deal with risk as well. आपने बिल्कुल सही चीज पकड़ी अनस कि भाई we are forcing banks to lend again, and isn't that risky? रिस्क तो अभी भी है ना लेंड करने में. हम बस बैंक्स को फोर्स कर रहे हैं मनी सप्लाई प्रिंट करके, वी आर जस्ट फोर्सिंग बैंक्स टू लेंड टू मनी, बट रिस्क तो कहीं नहीं गया, रिस्क तो अभी भी है. द डिफरेंस इज दैट दिस इज अकंपनीड बाय न्यू रेगुलेटरी स्ट्रक्चर फॉर द बैंक्स which is more recognizing the risk. रिस्क एवर्स बिहेवियर तोड़ना है, लेकिन उसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि अननेसेसरी रिस्क अज्यूम करना है जैसे पहले कर रहे थे. Unnecessary risk assume नहीं कर, we don't have to assume that unnecessary risk, but what we can do is we can at least start lending to certain non-riskier avenues or less riskier avenue. वो तो at least करना है. Risk is addressed by new regulatory or new risk assessment new assessment tools in place. We'll study that in banking when we discuss Basel norms. Basel 3 norms in 2010 as a consequence of this crisis. We'll discuss that then. We'll discuss Basel norms. तब हम उसके अंदर ये रिस्क वाला बिहेवियर डिस्कस करेंगे. बिल्कुल सही पकड़ा आपने. Really good. I hope your question is answered on us. Good. Next, चिन्मय का क्वेश्चन है, so how did they control inflation even after injecting so much money of quantitative easing? They did not control. There is a risk that there would be inflation. Still, there is no inflation. अभी भी inflation नहीं है. Inflation in American economy is still about only 2%. In fact, their objective was to increase inflation because inflation was very less. They did not control inflation because inflation was not there. Shubham, sir, but when last year China issued negative yield bond and many European businesses, corporate, government, etc. buying it, why not? Why they buy? Because it is not reflect of QE in that case. देखो, negative yield bond is a sign of strength of central bank. Your central bank says that we are ready to increase asset prices so much so that there would be negative yield. हमारे पास इतना पैसा है, we have so much. Let's say talk about China. It's a sign that they are saying we have so much money that we are even ready to bear loss. We will give you more money than what is market price. That is just a signal of that. ठीक है? That signal gives signal to market to reduce interest rate. सरकार नेगेटिव ले रही है तो आप कम से कम अपना इंटरेस्ट रेट तो कम करो. Point. What was the point of this discussion? The point was interest rates will reduce. Even if they don't come to negative, still it's a signal that interest rates should come down or will certainly come down. ये increased yield will enable interest rates to come down. So that's a signal. It's more of a signal. Mitali ka question, sir, does that mean American economy will recover on cost of developing economies? Necessarily doesn't mean that. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. It will recover on cost of developing economies. But yes, other economies will bear the brunt of this. No doubt about this. No doubt. Indian economy, Turkish, Malaysian, all these economies will bear the negative consequences of QE. If you think about it, we have also reaped the benefit of that. है ना? Dollars आए, India में more investment हुआ, because of that jobs in India got created. So if you think about it, that also led to improvement in Indian economy. If you think about it. So certainly yes, there would be a loss as well. Okay? But don't say that it will be American recovery at the cost of others. ऐसा नहीं. This is a too harsh an assessment. Lakshya का क्वेश्चन है, सर ऑन द न्यू बॉन्ड इशूड हाउ इज अ 3% इफेक्टिव यील्ड बिकॉज एट 3% इंटरेस्ट रेट एंड विद सम प्रीमियम इफेक्टिव यील्ड विल बी इवन लो. हाँ यार, बिल्कुल लो होगी. इट वुड बी लोअर देन दिस, इट वुड बी इवन लोअर देन दिस, बट आई सेड एक्सप्लेनेशन पर्पसेस के लिए 3% ठीक है ना. 105 में 102 में खरीदा 5% इंटरेस्ट है तो 3% इज द यील्ड. इफेक्टिवली इट विल बी इवन लेस देन दैट. यस, आई एग्री. मैंने बोला था यार कि इस पॉइंट पे मेरे को मत बोलना. आई एम जस्ट अप्रोक्सीमेटिंग अ लिटिल सो दैट थिंग्स गेट मोर क्लियर. Certainly it would be less. 105 में खरीदा है, 102 में खरीदा है, 5% इंटरेस्ट है, but that is spread out over the years. Therefore, yield would be a little bit different. It will not exactly be 3%. Abhinav, sir, how does bond interest rate affect all situation? Does the interest rate that people get on their savings bank does not play any role? Abhinav, interest rates are market interest rates, and all other interest rates depend upon that. Interest rates on bonds, they are a good indicator of market interest rates. Savings interest rates are also determined by that, or also not determined, influenced by that. Point is, all interest rates will move in one direction. अगर बॉन्ड पे इंटरेस्ट रेट कम हो रहा है तो सेविंग्स का इंटरेस्ट भी कम होगा. अगर रेपो रेट कम हो रहा है तो बॉन्ड का और सेविंग्स का इंटरेस्ट रेट भी कम होगा. So all these interest direction is important. We are not concerned about just one interest rate. सेविंग्स रेट कम हो रहा है तो बैंक का लेंडिंग भी कम होगा, गवर्नमेंट का बॉन्ड इंटरेस्ट रेट भी कम होगा, आरबीआई का रेपो रेट भी कम होगा. ऑल इंटरेस्ट रेट्स मूव. इट्स जस्ट वन thought of interest rate that this interest rate will move lower in general. All interest rate will move together lower in general. That is what the thought is. ठीक है, चलो. With this, I'll end the class now. Thank you so much, everybody. देखो डिक्टेट भी आपको करवा दिया है. आई थिंक दैट नाउ you should be able to contemplate things more. और हम नेक्स्ट क्लास में डिस्कस करते हैं. मिताली का क्वेश्चन और आया है, वुड सच लार्ज स्केल इंक्रीज इन मनी सप्लाई हैव एन इफेक्ट ऑन वैल्यू ऑफ करेंसी? सर्टेनली यस, बिल्कुल करेंसी के ऊपर बिल्कुल क्यों नहीं इफेक्ट होगा. 100% इफेक्ट ऑन करेंसी. करेंसी क्राइसिस लास्ट वर्ड लिखा तो है हमने, इंडियन इकोनॉमी की करेंसी क्राइसिस. सर्टेनली इट वुड इफेक्ट वैल्यू ऑफ करेंसी. सर्टेनली यस, 100%. ठीक है, चलो. सो आई लीव द क्लास नाउ. आई सिंसियरली होप, आई एक्सपेक्ट कि आपने एंजॉय की होगी क्लास. इट वॉज अ फेयरली कॉम्प्लेक्स टॉपिक. आई थिंक दिस इज दैट टॉपिक विच leaps us to that maturity level of seeing economics in action. शायद मुझे ऐसा लगता है टॉपिक इतना अच्छा, इतना इंपॉर्टेंट है. Now we are able to realize economy in action more clearly because many concepts are involved here and it is something that actually happens. ठीक है, चलो. तो please revise the class. Please have a look at what we discussed. Please read about quantitative easing from your printed material. Even though the note given there is not very nice, फिर भी वहां से भी एक बार पढ़ लेना. ठीक है, चलो. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night. Take care of yourselves. We'll see each other tomorrow. If there is any more question, I'll answer that. Okay? Bye-bye. Take care.